A lone warrior stands against a monstrous guardian. Yuta channels his power, enhancing both strength and speed. In a flash of darkness and fire, he closes the distance, and his blade tears through the giant's defenses. With a final breath, the battle is won. His companions, Misuzu and Evi, rush in to celebrate. Misuzu is amazed at how far they've come in just 2 months. Evi teases that he's the man loved by the dungeon, which is a very dramatic way of saying he has plot armor. But together they set their sights on the dungeon's deepest levels. But Yuta's journey began in a world of fire and ruin, a time when he was just Rokuju Yuta, level 1, a normal student walking home from school, wondering why he even bothered with exams anymore. A call from his worried father urges him to talk to a teacher, but Yuta just trudges on, ignoring the advice. He arrives at his classroom, 3A, and sits alone, isolated from the noise around him. Suddenly, a figure lands in front of his desk, a classmate with a cruel smile, because high school isn't complete without one. The bully taunts him, saying it doesn't matter where Yuta goes. Another student chimes in, asking about the commotion, and a third with a menacing grin joins the fun. He's been tormenting another student since middle school. Now he turns his attention to Yuta, asking about his plans. Yuta can only force a weak smile and agree. The bully grabs him, revealing he's going to the same place. But Yuta finally snaps, refusing to be dragged down with him. The place in question is Dungeon High School, where the bully offers his protection in exchange for servitude. He repeats that he's not going, his voice filled with desperation. Just then, another student walks into the classroom. A friend greets her, and we learn her name is Misuzu. She seems taken aback by the commotion. Yuta's eyes drift towards her for just a moment. A mistake the bully is more than happy to point out. Because what's high school without public humiliation? He accuses Yuta of staring at her, despite his denials. Then he shouts to the entire class that Yuta has a crush on her, leaving Misuzu understandably confused by the sudden drama. Her friend calls out, just as confused by the scene. The bully is warned to stop as the teacher is coming, and right on cue, a scarred teacher walks in. His eyes land directly on Rokuju Yuta. He asks for a word with him later. The inevitable trip to the guidance counselor's office. The teacher questions his decision to avoid Dungeon High, but Yuta remains resolute, refusing to go. He wants to enter a dungeon on his own strength and go to a place where no one else could follow. A familiar feeling for someone who's always been an outcast. The teacher dismisses his dream as a foolish fantasy. He slams his hand down, his patience worn thin, but Yuta's gaze remains unbroken. The teacher even brings up his worried father, a line Yuta refuses to let him cross. He's told he doesn't understand how the world works, that a kid like him entering a dungeon is just asking to die. Yuta clenches his fist, having heard enough. He gets up to leave, stating that tomorrow he turns 15, and that tomorrow he's going to the dungeon. He promises not to die so it won't tarnish the teacher's record. The man is absolutely furious at his defiance, but Yuta just walks away, ignoring his teacher's pointless rage. In the hall, he hears a voice call out to his bully, Ikamoto. The tormentor is getting praised by another student. He smugly remarks that the teachers obviously like him more. Yuta looks down, reflecting on a school life he won't miss. He knows that from now on, he'll be risking his life every day. And the scene shifts to a specific moment 15 years in the past, when suddenly, all across the world, portals began to tear open reality, unleashing what would come to be known as dungeons. 1,000 of them in total. The world was forever changed by these game-like rules. Some found incredible wealth, others gained wondrous powers, and Yuta has been preparing for this day ever since. As he packs his bag, a worried voice calls out his name. He looks over at the girl, Imari. Her face is filled with a desperate, unspoken plea. A flashback reveals their shared past. Their parents remarried, then promptly abandoned them both, leaving Yuta and Imari to raise themselves. Back in the present, she begs him not to go. She even threatens to follow him if he dies. Her desperate words finally break through his resolve. He realizes his stepsister is the only one who truly cares, so he lies through his teeth, promising to be back by night. And with a quiet goodbye, he steps out the door. Alone on the train, he heads towards his destiny. An ad for the Ikabukuro dungeon hangs above him, a cruel irony. He clutches the last of their savings in his hand. The only thing he's grateful to his parents for is this money. But his quiet reflection is suddenly shattered. 2 other passengers point him out as an explorer. They whisper warnings to stay away from people like him. An older man even offers some unsolicited, grim advice. His own brother died chasing glory in the dungeons. Another passenger overhears, her expression filled with pity. But Yuta ignores them all as he arrives at his destination. He admits to himself that he did want to go, but not if it meant being Ikamoto's servant. and he couldn't bear the thought of Imari following him, so he made his choice for both of them. He tells himself not to overthink it. As he steps off the train at Ikabukuro station, the first rule of the dungeon is simple: you must be 15. The second rule is, well, we'll get to that later. You must enter of your own free will, unasked by anyone, and so he runs towards his new beginning. He takes the first step onto the curb, and the third rule appears: you cannot be forced to enter. Before him stands the special grade Ikabukuro dungeon, a chaotic maelstrom of dark energy and floating debris. The sight is enough to stop anyone in their tracks, but Yuta just smiles, ready to face the entrance, until a familiar voice calls out his name in shock. It's a girl named Kiriyama, because his day wasn't complicated enough. She rushes over, questioning why he'd come to such a place, and Yuta, completely flustered, asks if she's here to do the same. She explains she's just here to observe the special grade dungeon. Her real goal is a much safer D-rank one. Yuta is completely caught off guard by her logic. He can only stammer, realizing how insane his own plan is. She then reveals her grand dream of becoming a world-renowned hero, a dream that Yuta quietly admits he shares. Kiriyama is absolutely ecstatic to find a kindred spirit, and in that moment Yuta knows he wants to be by her side. She laments that no one at school really understands her ambitions. A shame, since she's more of a monster-slaying girl than a pretty face. He can't help but let out a small, flustered laugh. He admits he never saw this side of her at school. She reveals she also wanted to enter a dungeon immediately, but Yuta replies that at least her parents cared enough to cry. His quiet confession leaves her completely stunned. He immediately regrets getting carried away and saying too much. He tries to make a quick escape, but she calls out his name. He stops, a worried expression on his face, but she just smiles, telling him not to make that face. And in a move no one saw coming, she asks for his number. Yuta can't believe she's serious about getting his number. He awkwardly fumbles through his phone to exchange contacts. Kiriyama tells him she thinks his way of life is incredibly cool, and that he should carry himself with confidence. With a final wave, she tells him to be careful and then heads off. Yuta is left completely speechless by the encounter. He looks up at the sky, quietly agreeing with her. His next stop is a shop filled with weapons and gear for explorers. He stares in awe, a kid in a very dangerous candy store. To enter, he has to verify his identity with his ID card. He steps through the doors of the explorer's shop. He's seen places like this in videos before, but the sheer scale of it is breathtaking. An entire wall is lined with high-powered firearms. In a world with dungeons, old laws are more like suggestions. He wanders through the aisles until one item stops him cold. The legendary sword of the Flame Emperor Agni. Yuta's eyes sparkle with pure, unadulterated awe. His gaze then drifts down to the display case, and his dreams are promptly crushed by the price tag. He shakes his head, realizing he needs to focus on practical gear, so he pulls up a DoTube guide for beginner explorers. The video offers advice for those who'd rather not die on the first floor, and the top recommendation is a full set of US military equipment. The host explains that for 300,000 yen, it's a small price to pay for your life. And just like that, our boy is completely sold. He quickly gathers all the recommended items into his basket. With his shopping complete, he looks for the checkout counter. A friendly clerk with glasses waves him over. He nervously places his gear down, hoping he hasn't forgotten anything. The clerk gives him a knowing, almost predatory smile. She asks if this is his first time buying a firearm. She then suggests a few more essential items for a beginner. The final bill is a gut punch to his already thin wallet. Yuta tries on his new gear, feeling completely out of place, but he shakes off the doubt because there are no refunds on Destiny. He heads back out to the counter, his preparations complete. But the clerk's expression suddenly shifts to one of alarm, just as a wild-looking man bursts through the shop's entrance. His eyes burn with a furious, almost unhinged intensity. Yuta's eyes widen, completely stunned by the sudden intrusion. The moment the man entered, a chilling aura filled the entire shop. His gaze locks onto Yuta with terrifying intensity. He demands to know who told Yuta to wear the military uniform. Yuta can barely breathe, paralyzed by the man's overwhelming presence. The clerk calls out to the man, trying to intervene, but he just snaps back with a threatening glare. He screams at her to stay out of it. So much for a peaceful shopping trip. The terrified clerk falls to the ground, completely intimidated. The man turns back to Yuta, asking if the gear is for that woman. The man demands to know where a kid like him got that kind of money. Yuta stammers out the truth about the money his parents left, and the promise he made to his sister to return. But the stranger suddenly holds up a hand, telling him to wait. He turns his fury on the clerk, calling her a terrible person. Then he grins, announcing that he's actually a good guy. Okay, sure. He explains how the government tries to protect young explorers, and how predatory clerks get bonuses for taking all their money, Yuta's eyes widen in horrified realization. He was never being helped, he was just being scammed. His journey hasn't even begun, and it's already a complete disaster. He came to the dungeon to escape the cruelty of his old life, only to find it waiting for him in a different form. The stranger suddenly tells Yuta to return all his gear for a full refund. He then offers, with a confident grin, to be his guide for the day, an offer that leaves both Yuta and the clerk completely stunned. The man remembers Yuta's promise to his sister. He can't stand the thought of the kid dying and making her cry. Yuta is touched by this unexpected kindness, thanking the old man. The man introduces himself as Nagumo and insists he's only 20. Yuta agrees, putting his faith in his new, slightly unhinged guide. Nagumo leads him towards a different entrance to the dungeon. Yuta asks why they aren't using the main gate like everyone else. Nagumo pauses, remembering he's with a complete beginner. He explains that his usual route is a bit too intense for a first-timer. With that, he turns and steps towards the swirling darkness. A determined look crosses his face as he prepares to cross the threshold. Yuta's eyes widen, a mix of fear and excitement on his face. He steps through the portal into a vast, unfamiliar landscape. He has finally arrived inside the dungeon. The first thing Yuta notices is the overwhelming heat. Because while it's the middle of winter in the real world, Nagumo explains that the dungeon has its own climate. Welcome to the Ikabukuro savannah. No, seriously. Yuta can only stare in disbelief at the impossible landscape. But his sightseeing is cut short by the local welcoming committee. Nagumo, completely unfazed, pulls out a weapon. A strange, ornate staff materializes in his hand. He then tosses it to Yuta, telling him to use it. And with a grin, he reminds the kid this is a one-day-only special. Nagumo tells him the goal is to reach level 3 by the end of the day. Yuta nervously agrees, clutching the staff with a white-knuckled grip. Their first lesson begins with the local wildlife, the goblin. These creatures are aggressive and hunt in packs of 3 or more. They're also known as human killers, so, friendly neighbors. As they walk through the impossible savannah, Yuta asks Nagumo how he first started out as an explorer. A sudden realization seems to dawn on him. He asks if Nagumo is one of the legendary first generation, but Nagumo simply tells him to get ready for a fight. Nagumo points towards a distant camp, their first target. But in the blink of an eye, he's gone. Yuta frantically looks around, calling out for his guide, but Nagumo's focus is already locked on the enemy. He's already closed the distance to the goblin outpost. Yuta can only watch in absolute disbelief. Nagumo moves like a phantom, dispatching the goblins with ease. He then points back, sending one of the creatures flying. Yuta looks up, completely unprepared for this pop quiz, as a goblin is launched directly at him. He barely manages to brace himself with the staff, as the goblin slams into the ground right in front of him. Yuta yells at Nagumo, asking him to finish it off, but his guide just stares back, completely unmoved. He orders Yuta to be the one to land the final blow. Yuta hesitates, looking down at the twitching creature. He tries to argue that it's already dead anyway, a classic rookie mistake. But Nagumo just screams at him to hurry up. Yuta looks down, realizing he has no choice. He raises the staff, his hands shaking as he prepares to kill for the first time, but his mind screams that he can't bring himself to do it. He looks down at the creature, his weapon feeling impossibly heavy. He tells himself this is why he came to the dungeon in the first place. He has to do this if he ever wants to level up and escape the life of being Ikamoto's servant. His grip on the staff tightens, his resolve hardening. With a desperate cry, he pushes past his fear and brings the weapon down with a sickening finality. The goblin's hand falls limp, its struggle finally over. Yuta can only stand there, panting and trembling from the ordeal. Yuta stares down, asking if the creature is finally gone. Wiping the sweat from his brow, he follows Nagumo's order to move. But he can't tear his eyes away from what he's just done. The first life he's ever taken, now lying still at his feet. A moment of silence falls over the vast alien savannah. Yuta sits, completely drained, while Nagumo snacks like it's a field trip. His guide offers him some water, asking how his first kill felt. Yuta can only admit that he feels sick to his stomach. Nagumo recalls his own first time when he was just 15. Confirming Yuta's suspicion that he is one of the legendary first generation, Nagumo correctly guesses that school wasn't exactly Yuta's happy place. He shares his own origin story of just killing goblins until something happened. He casually mentions taking down 10 demons, an old school term. The lesson continues. Yuta must reach level 3 on this floor, because each level has a cap, so no grinding on weaklings forever. Yuta swallows hard, the pressure mounting with every new rule. He looks to the sky, questioning the very nature of this world. Nagumo just grins, calling it a mass of mysteries. Real helpful, but then his expression turns serious once more. He says the dungeon has its favorites, bound together by fate. Nagumo admits he also entered alone, but soon found his companions. Yuta thinks back, remembering he had people he once called friends. But in reality, he was just a way for them to pass the time. He believes he's just not destined to have true companions. Nagumo considers this for a moment, a thoughtful look on his face. Then his gaze sharpens with a sudden unwavering conviction. He tells Yuta that he is one of those chosen by fate. The kid can only stare, completely stunned by the declaration. He's thankful for the kind words, even if they're just for today. Nagumo just smiles, warning him not to complain about what comes next. Yuta steels himself, promising not to complain. And with that, Nagumo declares the lesson will continue. The training montage begins with a flurry of brutal strikes. But these creatures are more than just mindless beasts. They're filled with a cold, calculating rage. Nagumo explains that if he steps in to help, the dungeon won't reward Yuta with any experience. From now on, our boy is on his own. No pressure. Yuta can only agree, his face a mask of terror and resolve. And his next opponent is already upon him. A spiky-maned goblin charges with a furious roar. Yuta is completely paralyzed by fear, unable to move a muscle. His mind screams a single terrifying thought. This is the end. But just as the claw strikes, a flash of light erupts from his chest. The creature is thrown back, stunned by the invisible barrier. Yuta looks down, realizing the necklace Nagumo gave him is glowing. His guide's voice cuts through the chaos, warning that the accessory's warranty is limited. Nagumo tells him to look forward because the fight isn't over. Yuta forces his trembling body to obey, his resolve hardening, and with a desperate cry, he finally charges into the fray. But his desperate charge ends with a brutal counter. He falls, wondering if this is how his dream dies. He refuses to let his story end like this. The goblin raises its weapon for the final blow. But in that moment, he sees the face of his tormentor, Ikamoto, and he remembers the life he swore he'd never return to. A fire ignites within him, fueled by pure desperation. He swings the staff with every last ounce of his strength, unleashing a wild, unexpected counterattack. The creature can only stare in shock as the blow connects. He screams that he won't die like a nobody on the roadside. He puts everything he has into one final, desperate swing. The staff pierces through the creature's defenses, and the monster dissolves into nothingness. Yuta can only stare, realizing he actually won. Nagumo catches him, offering a potion and his congratulations. Yuta worries about the cost, but Nagumo insists he drink it. The potion's magic quickly mends his wounds. Nagumo gives him 10 minutes to rest before the next round. And just like that, the brutal training continues. While Nagumo watches on, looking impossibly cool, Yuta is a whirlwind of desperate, clumsy strikes. Nagumo yells at him to keep fighting, offering zero sympathy. But Yuta pushes on, fueled by sheer willpower, until finally, a familiar notification appears in the air. He clutches his head, hearing a strange woman's voice call out to him. A flash of light confirms he's reached level 2 after defeating 10 goblins. He lands on his feet, feeling a surge of new power. Nagumo looks over, a hint of surprise on his face. He smiles, finally acknowledging that Yuta has leveled up. Yuta looks at his hands, noticing a change in his own body. He can't believe he leveled up, even with Nagumo's help. His guide just tells him to open his status screen, and a digital interface materializes right in front of him. His stats have all increased, and he's even gained new skills. Nagumo leans in, shocked by Yuta's incredibly high gacha luck. Yuta feels the difference, noting how much lighter everything feels. But then a sudden, worried thought crosses his mind. He nervously asks Nagumo about the cost of the potion from earlier, but his guide just tells him that his success wasn't just luck. Nagumo insists he take the potion, dismissing any talk of payment. Yuta asks why he's being so generous. Nagumo asks if he'd rather die regretting not taking the help. He simply says he took a liking to the kid and that's all. Yuta is left completely stunned by the simple kindness. He promises to pay Nagumo back for everything someday. With that settled, Nagumo announces their next challenge. 2 at once. But suddenly Nagumo's expression sharpens. He yanks Yuta back just as a new threat appears, and he mutters that this is going to be a real pain. Yuta looks over, confused by the sudden change in direction. Lying in the tall grass is the body of another explorer. His eyes widen in horror, realizing it's a person. Nagumo laments that they were too late to save them. Yuta asks if this was the work of goblins, but a horrifying realization begins to dawn on him. Nagumo explains that the killer wasn't a monster. It was another human being. Yuta can only stare, completely unable to process the words. Nagumo grabs his hand, deciding they're leaving if they find trouble. Yuta's eyes widen in a flash of light. as the world around them dissolves into a blur and reforms into a completely different place. They're suddenly in a modern apartment, leaving Yuta utterly baffled. Nagumo calmly explains this is his place, right above the shop. An exterior shot confirms they're back in the city. Yuta realizes they teleported, confirming his guide is no mere mortal. But their return is interrupted by a woman with dark hair. Nagumo demands to know what she's doing in his room, because she's in his bed with a mysterious elf-like woman. The elf-like woman just gives a knowing little smile, as Nagumo covers Yuta's eyes, telling him not to stare. The dark-haired woman introduces herself as Fumiko, and Yuta suddenly becomes very aware of his own ragged appearance. She tells him to go take a bath, much to Nagumo's annoyance. The elf teases Nagumo about his sudden kindness, because of course she does. But Fumiko's expression turns serious, warning him he's being too helpful. Nagumo looks away, quietly admitting that he already knows. Yuta washes away the grime of his first dungeon dive. While life in the city continues on, completely unaware, his phone displays the new contact he just made. He walks home, still reeling from the day's events. He was prepared to kill monsters, but not to find the body of another human. He heads down in the elevator, his mind still racing. He feels bad for imposing, wishing he could have learned more. Nagumo advises him to stay away from Ikabukuro tomorrow. Yuta asks if it's really okay to take a break already, but Nagumo warns him that high-level explorers are a bigger threat. His final piece of advice: find companions and trust in fate. He reflects that if he had friends, he wouldn't be doing this alone. He arrives home expecting the apartment to be completely empty, but Imari is there to greet him, her face filled with relief. He can only stare in shock, calling out her name. He asks why she isn't at school, and she admits she was too worried. She asks if he's okay, but he proudly announces he's now level 2. He explains that a kind, high-level explorer helped him out. He quickly clarifies that his guide was a man. Imari repeats the name Nagumo, a thoughtful look on her face. Yuta asks if she knows him, confused by her reaction. She smiles, relieved that a good person was watching over him. She tells him to go to school, promising a celebratory meal for his birthday. Later that night, the clock ticks past 11. But Yuta lies awake, his mind still racing. He thinks about Nagumo's advice to find companions, and his thoughts drift to Kiriyama, wondering if he could ever ask her. Just then, his phone buzzes, nearly giving him a heart attack. He stares in disbelief at the caller ID. It's Kiriyama, and he scrambles to answer the call. With a nervous voice, he finally says hello. Kiriyama's voice comes through, asking if he has a moment to talk. Yuta, sitting up straight like he's in a job interview, asks what's wrong. She tells him she took the D-rank exam today and is pretty sure she passed. He can only offer a quiet congratulations, but she downplays it, saying D-rank dungeons have a low-level cap. Yuta listens, unsure where this conversation is going. She takes a deep breath, steeling herself for what comes next. And then she asks if he would go to the dungeon with her, an offer that completely short-circuits our boy's brain. He stammers, asking if she's serious, reminding her how dangerous it is. She insists this isn't some casual offer. She's serious about this path. Yuta can only manage a weak, sweat-drenched smile. He asks if she's really inviting him to go with her. Her stunned silence on the other end is almost deafening, and our boy immediately panics, thinking he's already ruined it. But she just says she's happy and incredibly relieved. Yuta quietly admits he was too scared to go in by himself. They make plans to meet, avoiding Ikabukuro because of recent events. The scene shifts to the scenic Yamanashi Prefecture and the entrance to the Kofu beginner-level dungeon. But Kiriyama's first taste of combat doesn't go down so well. Yuta checks on her as she laments her own weakness. She realizes how terrifying it is, even with the necklace Yuta lent her. But she forces herself up, ready for the next round. Yuta can't help but be impressed by her resolve. She admits that even though it's scary, she absolutely loves it. Yuta blurts out that he admires her passion for living life to the fullest. She tells him to call her Misuzu, since they're companions now. The plan is simple. Yuta will use his gun to help her level up. And he takes aim, ready to support his new partner. He lines up the shot, a small, spiky creature in his sights. The bullet finds its mark, taking out the monster's support. He gives Misuzu the signal, and she rushes into the fray. She follows the plan, aiming to weaken the larger goblin. Her spear strikes true, a perfect follow-up to Yuta's shot. And with that, her first solo victory is secured. Their strategy is simple: isolate the enemy and create a fair fight. But the dungeon rarely plays fair as another monster ambushes her. The creature's grip tightens, its intentions anything but friendly. Yuta screams for it to let her go as it drags her away. He asks if she's okay, impressed by her toughness. He explains that was just an accident. But in that moment, she realizes she's leveled up. She's shocked, saying she heard a strange voice. And with a flash of light, she's officially level 2. She can already feel the difference, her weapon feeling lighter. Yuta congratulates her and she thanks him for his help. He nervously tells her to check her stats like a proud gamer dad. A digital interface materializes right in front of her. Her stats have increased, but she has no skills yet. Misuzu is shocked that Yuta's stats are so different from hers. He explains it's probably because of the situation she leveled up in. He was fighting for his life while her training was much safer. She sighs, realizing that playing it safe has its drawbacks. So Yuta suggests they up the difficulty, asking if she's ready for 3 at once. She just smiles, touching the necklace he lent her as a sign of her trust. She says this is where their real test as explorers begins, asking if he's also aiming for the top. Yuta agrees, but his protective instincts kick in, saying he can't let her die. His sudden, heartfelt declaration catches her completely off guard, and she grabs his hand, a new resolve shining in her eyes. She makes a promise he will protect her, and she will protect him. Yuta is taken aback, but a new resolve forms in his eyes, and with a simple agreement, their pact is sealed. The next day, they return to the dungeon, properly equipped, and this time Yuta has a real weapon. He asks if she's ready for the next challenge. Misuzu answers with a confident, battle-ready smile. She remarks on how incredible leveling up feels, as she easily dispatches another monster. Her senses are sharper now, and she tells Yuta she's ready for more. Yuta activates one of his newly acquired skills. Unleashing a powerful double strike with his blade, he immediately follows up with another ability, launching a stone bullet from his fist. But the rapid succession of attacks leaves him completely drained, which is terrible timing as Misuzu spots more monsters approaching. Yuta tells her not to overdo it, promising to provide support, but she refuses to back down, knowing she needs the challenge to grow stronger. With a determined cry, she charges forward without a hint of fear and lands a clean, decisive blow on her target. But her confidence is shattered as the necklace's barrier begins to crack. She's facing down not one, but 2 of the powerful creatures, and their combined assault is far too much for her to handle. Yuta screams for her to dodge, warning that the barrier is about to break. She grits her teeth, knowing he's right but unable to escape. The monster's relentless attack continues without pause. And with a final, brutal strike, her protection shatters completely. Her eyes widen in horror, realizing she's completely defenseless. A goblin immediately seizes the opportunity, grabbing her from behind. Its cruel intentions are made horrifyingly clear. Misuzu screams in terror, trapped by the creature. She's completely helpless in the monster's unyielding grasp. And in that instant, Yuta's world narrows to a single point of rage. The second goblin closes in, its intentions horrifyingly clear. Misuzu can only watch, frozen by absolute fear. But a sudden shot takes out the approaching threat, and another blast frees her from the goblin's grip. Yuta's blade flies through the air, a desperate last-ditch effort. The remaining monster turns its fury towards him, but Yuta is already there, shielding her from the attack. He takes the full force of the blow, shielding her completely. He glances back, his face a mask of pained resolve. He asks if she's okay, his voice filled with concern. But Misuzu can only look up, tears of terror in her eyes. She grabs onto him, her hand trembling uncontrollably. Yuta reaches down, calling out her name in a soft voice, but he stops himself, telling her to wait a moment. He worries that his touch would only remind her of the monsters, but Misuzu doesn't hesitate, throwing her arms around him. She sobs that she was completely useless, her confidence shattered. He tries to comfort her, telling her everything is okay. He promises that he'll be the one to protect her from now on, but he trails off, wondering what happens when he's in danger. Misuzu looks up, fiercely declaring that she will protect him in return. Yuta can only smile, moved by her unwavering resolve. He apologizes for underestimating the enemy, admitting he didn't expect 3. But Misuzu is already back on her feet, determined to reach level 3 today. Yuta is surprised by her sudden urgency, asking why she's in such a rush. She confesses that she came here in secret, against her parents' wishes. Apparently, they're not too keen on her new monster-slaying hobby. She's determined not to let him think leveling up is so easy. Yuta can only agree, swept up in her newfound intensity. She pulls out a checklist, having studied up on dungeon diving videos. With their 10-minute rest over, she's ready to put her knowledge to the test. Yuta quickly tells her he needs to reload his gun first. He runs for cover, telling her to keep watch while he handles his ammo. They regroup, knowing their next strategy could mean life or death. And their next target is a pack of 4 goblins. So much for easing back in. Yuta takes up a sniper position, ready to provide support. His plan is to thin the herd, taking out the weaker ones from a distance. His first shot rings out across the savannah, and the goblin archer never sees it coming. A perfect headshot drops the creature instantly. Misuzu celebrates, confirming she's the one with the new bow. She proudly shows off her loot, asking Yuta what he thinks. With their new strategy, they divide and conquer the next wave. And so the brutal grind for experience continues. After dozens of kills, they realize the monsters are adapting. Misuzu calls for another 10-minute break to check their gear. She stands ready, their teamwork growing stronger with every fight. But Misuzu suddenly looks over, a confused expression on her face. Yuta calls out her name, telling her to come over quickly. He rushes to her side, asking what's wrong. She holds up a strange coin she found on the last monster. Yuta's eyes widen as he recognizes the item. It's a gacha coin used for a special lottery every 10 floors. Misuzu is immediately ecstatic, wanting to go use it right away, because the siren song of loot boxes is apparently universal. Yuta can only sigh, completely defeated by her enthusiasm. He finally agrees, but tells her she only gets one try. They arrive at a strange tower, the dungeon's gacha zone, and with a single step, they enter the lottery room. Misuzu is ecstatic, finally feeling like a real explorer. Before them stands the legendary stone gacha machine. She eagerly inserts her hard-earned coin into the slot. The machine lights up, showing she has 10 tries left. She dreams of winning a legendary sword, but Yuta warns her it's mostly duds. But the siren song of the gacha is not so easily ignored. With a turn of the crank, a single prize capsule rolls out. Yuta smirks as Misuzu stares at her completely empty prize. But as the next capsule opens, it's not a weapon but a box of Tokyo banana snacks. Yuta explains that the white capsules just contain food and daily supplies. The next prize is a melon pan, which our boy seems to appreciate. But Misuzu refuses to give up, pulling the lever again and again. The machine spits out fully prepared meals, from ramen to a seafood bowl. And her next legendary prize is a single ballpoint pen. After 9 tries, she's left with nothing but snacks and office supplies. Defeated, she finally tells Yuta it's his turn to try. And on his very first pull, a golden capsule rolls out. He opens the capsule, a determined look on his face. But Misuzu points out it's just a drink, not a big deal. Yuta recognizes it as the same potion Nagumo gave him. A potion that's apparently worth 10 million yen. Misuzu pouts, claiming he stole her destined prize. She immediately suggests they sell it, much to his surprise. Yuta realizes they'll need the money for better gear to reach level 3. They could get 8 million, enough to fund their next expedition. Misuzu agrees, though she still feels cheated by the gacha gods. And with their prize in hand, they return to the city. Meanwhile, Misuzu trudges home after a long day of grinding. She arrives at her surprisingly fancy house, letting out a weary sigh. Even after reaching level 3, she knows her parents are going to be furious. She even considers running to Yuta's place if they get too angry. But as she announces her return, she's met with an unexpected welcome party. 2 women greet her, one asking if her dungeon trip was scary. Misuzu can only stare in shock, calling out to her older sister. The other sister immediately launches into a lecture about dungeon dangers. And Misuzu realizes these are the people she has to protect. The smiling one is her eldest sister, Reika, who travels the world for the UN. The other is her middle sister, Mei, a top model in America. No pressure. Misuzu looks on, filled with pride for her incredible sisters. A flashback to a younger Misuzu happily returning home, but her parents' welcome is anything but warm. She remembers always feeling that her father disliked her. He worked long hours at a terrible company, rarely ever home, and he was always complaining about a life he chose for himself. He pushed all his hopes and dreams onto his 2 eldest daughters, and despite his attitude, they both spectacularly succeeded. So a young Misuzu once asked what her own path should be. Her father could only stare, completely caught off guard. He told her she had no special talents and should just live a quiet life. You know, standard father of the year stuff. But back in the present, she pulls out the potion they won. Her father can only ask what she's holding. She proudly declares it's a potion worth 10 million yen, a price tag that leaves her father completely speechless. She explains that she and a classmate reached level 3 today. Her sisters are stunned by how quickly she's progressing, and Misuzu can only smile, finally feeling seen. Even her parents are impressed, though her sister warns of the dangers. Her father explodes, calling explorers nothing more than barbarians. But her sisters step in, telling him the world has changed. Mei calls him out for being naive and coddling his daughter. Misuzu can only watch, moved by her sister's defense. Mai explains that in this era, everyone is adapting to survive. The scene shifts to Yuta and Imari at a quiet cafe. He brings over breakfast, asking what she wanted to talk about. But his stepsister just sits there, pouting like her world has ended. Yuta is completely lost, wondering what he could have possibly done wrong. Meanwhile, Misuzu recalls the moment she realized she'd found a true companion. Imari pulls out her phone, asking if he knows someone. Yuta stares at the picture, completely clueless, until a sudden horrified realization dawns on him. He recognizes her from a massive billboard outside. Imari introduces the girl as a 15-year-old American supermodel. She says it's a shame, but two people have their limits. Because of course a supermodel is the next logical party member, and she asks if he can possibly refuse her now. Yuta insists he has to, feeling completely out of his league. But his eyes betray a different kind of resolve. As he remembers Nagumo's words to trust in his fate, Imari agrees, promising to tell her sister to refuse the offer. But Yuta is suddenly interrupted by an unexpected phone call. Imari looks at her own phone, a dawning horror on her face. Yuta nervously answers, completely unprepared for who's on the line. It's Misuzu's sister Mei, asking why he'd turned down the supermodel Evi. He stammers that his stepsister was supposed to join, and he'd be the only guy. Mei immediately asks if he's worried about having a harem party. She then laughs, casually dismissing his concerns about being popular. Yuta tries to explain his other reasons, admitting he's intimidated by them. But Mei's tone suddenly turns serious as she repeats the name Evi. She explains that Evi is also aiming for level 1000, and needs companions with the same insane level of passion. Mei says that if Misuzu trusts him, then she can rest easy. Imari looks on, completely stunned by her sister's words. Yuta panics, realizing this means the supermodel is actually coming. Mei happily explains that after their call, Evi got incredibly excited, and is apparently already on her way over from America. A confident smile confirms she's not taking no for an answer. Back at the cafe, Yuta is having a complete and total meltdown, because you can't exactly tell a supermodel to just turn around and fly home. Later, Misuzu asks if he's really that against the idea. Yuta admits he's just afraid of letting everyone down. She playfully scolds him for having so little confidence. After all, not many people would challenge a dungeon alone at his age. He can only look away, completely flustered by her praise. He still feels like he's not someone worthy of being looked up to. He changes the subject, saying he has two things to ask her. The first is that his stepsister, Imari, wants to join their party. Misuzu is immediately concerned, pointing out the massive level gap. Yuta falls silent, realizing she has a very good point. He explains that Imari is his stepsister, a product of their parents' remarriage, a fact that seems to completely short-circuit Misuzu's brain. He clarifies that she's only 14 and goes to a different school. Misuzu snaps back to reality, a thoughtful look on her face. She agrees, saying they'll need a fourth member in a couple of months anyway. The second question is where they should go next, Kofu or Ikabukuro. Misuzu realizes the problem isn't the dungeon, but the platform. He agrees, saying they need to decide what kind of explorers they want to be. They've hit the level cap for the first floor, so now they have to find the entrance to the second. The stairs to the next floor are unique to each party, and finding them in a place the size of a prefecture is a daunting task. Yuta realizes that the Kofu dungeon only has 20 floors. To reach their goal, they need a special grade dungeon with 100. Misuzu understands that a beginner dungeon won't be enough for their ambitions. Yuta agrees that if Evi is serious, Ikebukuro is their only choice. They consider other special grade dungeons like Osaka and Yokohama, but the mention of Yokohama brings a painful memory to mind. A live broadcast shows a powerful figure in the ruins of the city, a self-proclaimed ruler who warns others to stay out of their way. Misuzu recalls seeing the ruler of Yokohama on TV, a level 900 tyrant who takes a 30% cut of all earnings. Yuta realizes that's a steep price for entry, so their options are limited: Ikabukuro, Kofu, or Osaka. Misuzu admits moving is out of the question for her, but returning to Ikebukuro means dealing with the player killers. She wonders if they could just ask Nagumo to take care of them. Like calling pest control. Yuta is completely floored by the suggestion. He insists Nagumo isn't their personal problem solver, but he knows that wherever they go, he's not facing it alone anymore. He turns the question back to Misuzu, asking what she wants to do. But she suddenly reaches out, a new resolve hardening her expression, and grabs his hand, much to Yuta's complete shock. She tells him that she trusts his judgment more than her own, recalling their promise to always protect one another. So whatever he decides, she will follow without hesitation. Yuta's eyes narrow, knowing what they must do to grow stronger. He makes his choice. They're returning to Ikabukuro, back to the special grade dungeon where his journey first began, and so they return to the endless savanna of Ikabukuro. Yuta immediately takes off, his boots tearing through the tall grass. He moves with a speed he never could have imagined before. Misuzu calls out, telling him to wait up. He skids to a halt, realizing he's left her far behind. She struggles to catch her breath, completely exhausted. He apologizes, admitting the level up has made him feel much lighter. They agree to slow down, knowing the search for the stairs will be long. But Misuzu's gaze is suddenly drawn to something off the path. She spots a pile of clothes, discarded in the middle of nowhere. He realizes these are the belongings of the explorer he found with Nagumo. Yuta explains that in the dungeon, only inorganic items last this long. He urges her to leave before the killer returns, but Misuzu stops him. He turns back, completely confused by her sudden halt. She insists on searching the belongings, refusing to run from an unknown enemy. Yuta can only stare, surprised by her unwavering resolve. But among the clothes are some more personal items, a discovery that leaves our boy completely and utterly flustered. He quickly asks if she's found anything else, and she points out 2 empty potion bottles discarded in the grass. Misuzu recalls a disturbing rumor she once heard from a friend, about a type of player killer who enjoys tormenting their victims, a horrifying thought that leaves them both completely stunned. But Misuzu points out the victim still has unused potions in their bag, 3 of them to be exact, each worth a cool 1,000,000 yen. She argues that since dungeons are lawless, it's not technically stealing. But Yuta realizes the killer must be a mid-level explorer, and he begins to question if coming here was a fatal mistake. Suddenly, a sound from the grass makes him whip around. He asks Misuzu if she heard it, but she insists it wasn't her. He turns, a sudden sharp pain in his arm. His eyes widen as he realizes he's been shot. From the shadows of a nearby tree, a masked goblin takes aim with a firearm. So much for a fair fight. Another shot rings out, sending Misuzu flying through the air. Yuta dives to catch her, asking if she's all right. She says her armor took the hit, but her arm is injured. He scrambles for their bag, reaching for a potion. But Misuzu is completely panicked, terrified he's about to die. Yuta quickly drinks a potion, identifying their new foe, a goblin gunner. The goblin gunner stares them down, its weapon ready to fire again. Yuta tells Misuzu to wait, planning to use his skills to end this. But she has a different idea, her bow already in hand. With a determined look, she activates a skill of her own, unleashing a powerful new ability she calls Refined Shot. At the same time, Yuta takes aim with his firearm. His bullet streaks across the savannah towards the enemy. The shot connects, stunning the creature for just a moment. And Misuzu seizes the opportunity, her focus unwavering. Her arrow splits, taking out the entire goblin squad in one perfect volley. Yuta can only stare, completely stunned by her incredible shot. Misuzu tackles him in a hug, overcome with relief. He can only stammer out her name, completely flustered. But she just holds on tighter, glad they're both safe. And among the remains, a new prize catches her eye. She apologizes, admitting she needs to be more careful. Yuta tells her she did well as she rushes to claim their loot. He admits it was a painful fight, but worth the risk. Misuzu claims the coin because finders keepers is apparently dungeon law. But her celebration is cut short by a horrifying realization. Back in the city, they admit they couldn't find the stairs. Yuta looks at the gacha coins they've collected. He decides against using them, not wanting to attract the killer's attention. As they walk home, he admits that at least the coins are a good sign. But Misuzu suddenly stops, a strange expression on her face. Yuta turns back, calling out her name in confusion. He apologizes for being distracted and tries to say goodnight. But she calls out his name, telling him to wait. And with a nervous blush, she asks him for a kiss, a request that completely short-circuits our boy's entire existence. Yuta stammers that they aren't even dating. She admits she's just as surprised by her own feelings. And in a rush of courage, he confesses she's the one he's liked all along. Her expression falls, completely misreading the situation. But then she leans in close, a playful smile on her face, and closes the distance between them, sealing their unspoken feelings in a single heartfelt moment. She pulls back with a radiant smile, asking if she's won him over, leaving Yuta completely speechless at her question. She gives him a light punch, telling him to forgive her anyway. She walks away, declaring she'll no longer lie about her feelings. Yuta can only stand there, his brain completely rebooting. He tries to rationalize it as a side effect of dungeon-induced adrenaline, and that he just happened to be the one standing there. But our boy is left a steaming, flustered mess on the sidewalk. The scene shifts to Imari's room, as she reassures someone on the phone. She insists there's no way she's getting along with her stepbrother. She tells them not to worry, as her mother is off chasing her own happiness. A woman she considers to be completely and utterly useless. A memory of her mother leaving for a more exciting life. The person on the other end scolds her for taking so long. She recalls her mother's new partner and his gambling addiction. Just then, a call from her mother lights up the screen. And with a burst of rage, she throws the phone across the room. She screams for her mother to just leave them all alone. A photo of their once happy family serves as a bitter reminder, but her anger quickly shifts to a different kind of frustration. She thought things were going well between Yuta and Misuzu, but she scoffs at the idea of a dungeon romance blooming, believing she's the only one who truly needs to understand him. She admits that at first she hated him. She recalls telling him to stay away from her things, a memory of a time when they were just strangers. A younger Yuta, only 2 months older than her. She even hid the fact they were related at school, because it was a shock to realize he was her family. She once confronted him, asking if he was being tormented, but Yuta could only stare back, completely stunned. His eyes filled with a desperate panic. He begged her to pretend they were strangers at school. He clenches his fist, insisting that's not the problem. Imari demands to know why he won't fight back, yelling that his weakness only encourages them. But he can only offer a quiet apology. She's stunned, asking why he's the one saying sorry. He just forces a smile, admitting he can't bring himself to do it. And she remembers thinking he was just pathetic. The memory shifts to him trying to make things better, offering to cook steak. A plan that immediately goes up in smoke, literally. The final result is a culinary disaster on a plate. She asks if he can't make it taste better, and he can only agree that it's awful. He just smiles, promising to make something better tomorrow. The memory shifts to 5 years ago, when he declared he'd become an explorer. Because ever since the dungeons appeared, Yuta had changed. He trained relentlessly, pushing himself to the absolute limit. Imari would tell him to stop, warning him that he'd just get himself killed. But he'd just smile back, saying he'd rather die trying than live doing nothing. She was stunned to see this hidden fire within the quiet boy she knew. And she realizes this was the moment she started to care. She even remembers the day he suddenly decided to bake a cheesecake. A true Renaissance man in the making. He took the first bite, a quiet moment between them. She takes a bite, surprised to find it's actually delicious. A reaction that makes our boy absolutely ecstatic. He celebrates finally getting her to praise his cooking. You know, the little victories. He explains that he tried extra hard today just for her. But Imari is confused, asking what's so special about today. He made the cake because it was March 15th, her birthday, a date she had completely forgotten, since no one ever celebrated it. But Yuta, the quiet boy she barely knew, had remembered. She recalls that every year, despite her coldness towards him, she had completely forgotten his birthday in return. And the weight of that realization comes crashing down on her. Her mother left and her stepfather followed soon after. She was convinced that everyone would eventually leave her side. But Yuta, the boy she had treated so poorly, was the only one who stayed, asking if she was all right. She had taken all the loneliness and anger from being abandoned, and he had simply smiled, forgiving her every single time. And she admits this was the moment she finally understood her own heart. All she could do in that moment was apologize again and again, because she believes she's the one who truly loves him most. Back in the present, Yuta confesses that he and Misuzu just shared a kiss. Imari freezes, her mind struggling to process his words. She forces a smile, saying she's happy it went well with the girl he likes, but Yuta admits he's scared of what will happen if things don't work out. He tries to explain his feelings to Imari, but she cuts him off, declaring that if it fails, she'll be the one to marry him. Because that's a totally normal backup plan. And with a scream, she throws her plate, refusing to hear any more. Yuta can only stare, completely stunned by her sudden outburst. She slams her fist down, admitting she can't handle the thought of him with someone else. And through her tears, she makes a desperate threat to end her own life if he tells her to give up. Yuta waves his hands, admitting he had a feeling this was coming. He takes a deep breath, trying to find the right words. He confesses that no matter how bad school was, he was happy to have her at home. Imari asks if he's telling her to give up just because they're family. Yuta admits he's completely overwhelmed and doesn't know what to think. But he closes his eyes, knowing one thing for certain. He promises that he will never, ever abandon her. He even offers to stop seeing Misuzu if that's what she wants. Imari can only look on, her heart completely torn. So he tells her that if she can't stand it, they should part ways now. A small knowing laugh escapes her lips. She teases him for being so dense about everything. But then she asks if he and Misuzu are aiming for level 1000. Yuta confirms that it's the one thing he's truly serious about. Imari tells him he doesn't have to decide anything right now. She believes her feelings are different from Misuzu's, and promises she'll catch up to him soon enough. Yuta can only stare, completely stunned by her declaration. But she has just one more request for him, a totally normal request to stay with him for the night. And so the night passes in a quiet, complicated peace. The next morning, a light snow falls over the city. Yuta walks, filled with a profound sense of self-loathing. Misuzu greets him, completely unaware of his internal crisis. They arrive at their meeting point, a dungeon supply shop. Yuta braces himself as he steps through the door, and is greeted by a girl who is definitely not dressed for a dungeon. She confirms their identities with a radiant, confident smile, leaving Yuta and Misuzu completely blinded by her supermodel aura. She declares that from now on, they'll be together for a long time, and she immediately greets him with a kiss on the cheek. Yuta is stunned by the Western greeting, while Misuzu fumes in the background. Iwai just smiles, crediting her perfect Japanese to a translation device. She then offers them a small investment for letting her join, a briefcase filled with a cool $1 million for each of them, a gift that Yuta and Misuzu immediately and frantically refuse. Iwai seems genuinely confused by their rejection of free money. Misuzu clears her throat, gathering her composure. She explains that they're companions now, and that's not something you pay for. Yuta agrees, saying a debt that large would be too much to handle. Yuta stammers, trying to find the right words to refuse. But Iwai is flanked by two very serious-looking bodyguards. They introduce themselves as Debit and Mark, her personal support. Because of course, a supermodel has an entourage. Iwai explains they're both level 10, but doubts Japan has many high-level players. She even asks if they can introduce her to a real-life ninja. Just then, a familiar voice calls out from across the shop. It's Nagumo, greeting him with a wide, confident grin. Yuta and the girls can only stare in complete disbelief. He's standing right in the middle of his own shop. The same clerk from before looks on, just as stunned as everyone else. Nagumo asks how he's been, as if they're old friends. He then turns to the clerk, giving her a piece of his mind, and offers her a bonus for her terrible customer service. He turns back to Yuta, asking why he was the one who got a call. But he's impressed that the kid managed to reach level 3 so quickly. He puts an arm around Yuta, ready to help him find the stairs, just as Fumiko and the elf arrive, asking if these are his new companions. Yuta confirms he followed his advice, but asks why Nagumo is here. Nagumo's expression turns deadly serious, explaining the killer is part of a party led by a man named Hizumi. Yuta and the girls are completely stunned by the news. He asks if Nagumo knows the man, who just calls him an old acquaintance. An acquaintance who happens to be a level 300 explorer, one who preys on women to power level his party. Standard networking. Nagumo's gaze turns serious as he looks at Yuta. He asks if our boy is still determined to take on Ikabukuro. Yuta admits that he's been having some serious doubts, wondering if returning here was the right choice after all. But hearing Nagumo's words, his resolve hardens once more. He knows he can't let Misuzu or Iwai become the killer's next victims. He admits he'd never forgive himself if they got hurt. So he declares that they're leaving Ikabukuro for good. Nagumo just looks on, a knowing expression on his face. Yuta turns to Misuzu, offering a quiet apology. But she's furious, asking why he's making the choice for her. Iwai steps between them, demanding an explanation for the drama. Nagumo cuts in, telling them to grab some new gear. He decides they're moving to a more private location. And just like that, they're back in the Ikabukuro dungeon. So much for leaving. Iwai asks if player killers are common overseas too. Iwai explains that the situation in America is far worse. Misuzu is stunned as Iwai details 3 years of critical mistakes. The US government, fearing the public's power, sealed the dungeons. But a dungeon left untouched for too long eventually collapses, unleashing devastation that destroyed 23 countries, including Japan. An unnoticed dungeon in Chiba claimed over 250,000 lives. Nagumo confirms that America's regulations completely backfired. Iwai says monsters now roam the sewers and Japan's heroes had to help. She adds that while dragons are a big deal in America, Japan seems to hunt them for sport. Yuta quietly admits he's seen one before and it was beautiful. Nagumo calls out Yuta's name, getting his full attention. He then offers to kill the man who's been causing trouble, an offer that leaves Yuta completely stunned. As one does. He asks if Nagumo is serious about taking out the player killer. He can't understand why Nagumo would go that far for him. Nagumo admits it just annoys him that some nobody is targeting a kid he's taken an interest in. But he says the final decision rests with Yuta, a choice that falls squarely on our boy's shoulders. He knows that logically he should hesitate, but at their current level, they stand no chance against the killer. Yuta's gaze is filled with a heavy, pained resolve. Misuzu and Iwai can only watch, their faces etched with worry. He knows that if they're targeted, he has no choice but to fight. He ran from school, but he won't run from the dungeon. And with a desperate plea, he asks Nagumo to make the choice for him. Nagumo's expression hardens in an instant. He agrees, though he knows Fumiko will be furious, because of course she will, and with a shout, he activates a forced teleportation skill. He vanishes in a blinding flash of light, leaving Yuta completely stunned by what just happened. And in an instant, Nagumo arrives to find Hizumi's party. The man boasts about his plans to build a personal empire. He even brags about the police consulting him after his many kills. He claims it's just what happens when explorers hit their limit. Fumiko, who came along, asks if he's the one who targets women. Her voice is filled with a cold, unwavering fury. She says she only helped Yuta because she wanted to save him, but Hizumi just threatens to kill her for her defiance. Back in the shop, Yuta and Misuzu are horrified by the story. They realize you can't afford to anger a high-level explorer. Fumiko adds that it's not just men who become player killers. Yuta asks Nagumo what they should do with the unconscious party, but Nagumo just raises a hand, his expression turning cold. And with a single word, he binds the entire party in magical chains. He casually tells Yuta the problem is solved, and our boy can only offer his thanks. Evie is completely stunned, asking what Nagumo's level even is. Hizumi wakes up screaming that he refuses to live up to Nagumo's expectations. Nagumo just looks on, completely unfazed by the killer's tantrum. Hizumi demands to know who he is and what he's done to him. Nagumo explains the difference between a first-generation explorer and a lucky second-generation punk. He tells the story of a young boy confronting the killer, accusing Hizumi of taking a life just 3 days prior. Hizumi scoffs, demanding to know who this kid thinks he is. His party members move in, one using a skill to appraise the boy. The man's eyes widen with a cruel, predatory amusement. He reports that the boy and his companion are only level 3. Hizumi realizes this is about revenge for the explorer he killed. His party explains the victim had outlived his usefulness to them. Yuta listens in horror as the story of the victim's final moments is told. He's confronted with a level of malice he never knew existed. Yuta can only look to Nagumo, his resolve now set. He turns to walk away, saying he has nothing more to add. But Hizumi just laughs, asking where he thinks he's going. A sudden flash of movement. As Nagumo casually puts on a pair of sunglasses, he recalls the party's pathetic excuses from just moments before. He tells them he might have overlooked them if they were only level 100. But at level 300, they're just pests who are hard to kill. He explains that in this world, some people are just destined to die. Hizumi's arrogance shatters, begging Nagumo to stop joking. And in a flash of darkness, the first of Hizumi's party is struck down. His companions can only watch in absolute abject terror. As Nagumo reveals a massive blade, his expression unreadable, he dispatches the rest of the party with terrifying casual ease. Fumiko and the elf can only stare, realizing he just ended them. Yuta worries he'll become like them, but Nagumo offers a dark reassurance, a promise that brings our boy a profound, tearful sense of relief. Nagumo just smirks, saying Yuta's words make this harder to do. But Yuta asks him to do it now, before he ever becomes so cruel. Nagumo agrees, warning that Ikabukuro is still too dangerous for them. He then tosses 2 more items to Misuzu and Iwai, rings of transformation, to help them avoid unwanted attention. Yuta is completely flustered by the unexpected praise. Nagumo tells him to just return everything once he hits level 200. As a totally reasonable long-term loan, Yuta can only bow his head, thanking him for everything. Nagumo tells him not to move, preparing to send them to Kofu, but Yuta has to ask why he's being so incredibly kind to him. Nagumo just activates his forced teleportation skill in response, and sends the 3 of them away in pillars of light. He looks on with a smile, wishing them the best on their journey. Nagumo stands alone, his sword planted in the ground. He crouches, wondering how things with Hizumi went so wrong. He remembers them as a group of overly friendly, clingy men. A flashback shows them begging for his help to find the next floor. And for a brief moment, Nagumo didn't mind being needed. But after finding the stairs, he overheard Hizumi's dark confession. The man had returned home to an unfaithful partner, and took a life outside the dungeon's lawless walls. He then tried to brush it off, even offering to set Nagumo up with someone else. A real class act. And somehow Hizumi was never arrested for his crime. The story shifts, explaining a time when high-level explorers were hunted down by the government and the captured were made examples of. Nagumo recalls that the police only learned later to just let explorers handle things. But his reflection is cut short as Fumiko rushes in with a warning. She explains that Hizumi's group is now targeting Yuta's party, and that their plan is to take out the boy in front of the girls. For funsies. Nagumo's playful demeanor vanishes, realizing she's not joking. He stands between 2 portals, his path now clear, but Fumiko has one more thing to ask of him. She reveals that Hizumi's group has been spotted in Yokohama, a territory belonging to a very powerful, very territorial ruler, who is now on his way to deliver some fiery customer service. And just like that, they're back in the Kofu dungeon. Yuta and the girls are still reeling from the forced teleportation. Misuzu realizes Nagumo had no choice but to end them. Levi is just impressed he took out a level 300 so easily, but Yuta worries about the toll it took on his guide. He knows that Nagumo was forcing himself to do it. He blames himself for ever returning to Ikabukuro in the first place, realizing that without Nagumo, they would have been wiped out. But Misuzu admits she was just as careless, and that their fate could have been the same as the killer's victims. Yuta clutches his head, the reality of their situation crashing down. He tells himself this isn't a game. They have to value their lives. He declares they'll spend the next year leveling up safely in Kofu. Misuzu agrees, knowing an encounter with Hizumi would have been their end. Yuta admits there are people here he'd rather avoid too, but Misuzu suddenly cries out in alarm. She realizes Nagumo's teleport left all their gear behind. Levi calmly tells the other two to get a grip. She holds up her phone, suggesting they just leave for now. And just like that, they're back in the real world, at a bus station. One of them steps off the bus, back on solid ground, and Yuta finds himself standing between two complete strangers. The transformed Misuzu lets out a small laugh at his confusion, as both girls tell him to stop staring and get a grip. He smiles, relieved that they're safe for the time being, but his relief is cut short by a familiar, shadowy figure. He realizes he's still in debt to Nagumo for the transformation rings. And speaking of entourages, Mark calls out looking for Levi. She yells back, completely shocking her own bodyguard. It seems her loyal guards ran all the way from Ikabukuro to deliver their gear, and so they return to the familiar landscape of the Kofu dungeon. Levi suggests they start fresh by checking each other's stats, and with a single command, their digital interfaces appear. She volunteers to go first, ready to show them what she's working with. Her stats reveal she's a level 2 summoner with ridiculously high charisma. You know, supermodel perks. The others are impressed by her rare class, as she asks to see Yuta's next. Yuta pulls up his own screen, calling his stats completely average, but Levi immediately calls him out on his insane gacha luck. Misuzu shows her own stats, feeling completely outclassed by the other two, but together, they form a perfectly balanced party, a warrior, a mage, and an archer. Misuzu admits she's a little jealous of Levi's summoning magic, so Yuta and Misuzu ask for a demonstration of her power. Evie's eyes narrow as she activates her skill, unleashing a massive summoning circle into the air. Yuta and Misuzu can only watch in complete awe as a small blue-skinned girl materializes from the light. Levi introduces her as Rin, a female goblin, a summon who can understand commands and even level up. You know, a perfect employee. With their party's abilities clear, Yuta turns to their main objective. The daunting task of finding the stairs to the next floor, Yuta suggests they split up to search for the stairs. Misuzu and Levi discuss the risks of exploring alone. Levi explains that in America, the dungeons are far more chaotic. Yuta recalls another type of threat, a hitman for hire, a man who takes on murder contracts through the internet. Misuzu wonders if leveling up can corrupt even innocent people. They learn of another dangerous figure, a monster enthusiast named Yonazaki. He was a biologist, exiled for his disturbing research on goblins. He simply observed as the creatures captured women, refusing to intervene. Levi concludes that this last guy is by far the most dangerous. And the last is a woman named Mikhaila, who can kill with a single look. A power that leaves both Yuta and Misuzu completely horrified. Yuta concludes that these three are the most dangerous people in Kofu, but he doubts they'll run into them on the lower floors, mentioning a ring that can turn you into a zebra. The party is completely stunned by the existence of such an item. Evie then decides it's time to show off her own impressive gear. She pulls out a magic bag that can hold up to 200 kilograms. Yuta is floored by its 100 million yen price tag. Misuzu shows off her own necklace, admitting it's all she could afford. And Yuta finally realizes just how wealthy their new companion is. He reflects on how strange it is to feel this way, to finally have companions he can trust and rely on. And for the first time, he admits that he's having fun. Misuzu notices his smile, asking what's on his mind. He looks over, offering her a genuine thank you. He explains that he owes all of this to her for inviting him. His heartfelt confession leaves her completely speechless. She blushes, admitting that without him, she'd just be another lonely girl. But Evie cuts in, telling them to get a room already, leaving the two of them to apologize for the awkward moment. Misuzu is left completely flustered by the comment, so she grabs Yuta, declaring that they're already dating. Evie can only look on, a little surprised by the news. She graciously allows it as long as they keep it professional. Yuta breathes a sigh of relief, his social life no longer in immediate danger. And with that, Their search for the stairs officially begins. They use a special app to map the vast dungeon floor. Misuzu puts on a brave face, ready for the long journey. The app guides them along the most efficient route. And so they walk, their eyes glued to their screens. They take a break for lunch, sharing information as a team. They fend off goblins but never take unnecessary risks. And so they walk, and walk, and walk some more through the endless savannah, until 10 long days have finally passed. And an exhausted Yuta finally shouts that he's found it. The stairs to the second floor, hidden in plain sight. A discovery that calls for an immediate classy celebration. Because nothing says dungeon explorer like a glass of champagne, Yuta nervously asks if they're even old enough to drink. But our boy is still a little overwhelmed by the situation. He asks if this massive skyscraper is where Iwai lives, a fact that leaves both Yuta and Misuzu completely speechless. Suddenly, a hand reaches out and grabs his. It's Misuzu, who pulls him closer, asking what's wrong. She admits that while he was searching, she was thinking only of him. Yuta realizes the champagne might be hitting a little harder than she thought. A sudden pinch to the cheek snaps him out of his daze. Iwai just smiles, reminding him not to forget she's here too. But Iwai quickly grabs his other arm, her expression a mix of shock and indignation. Misuzu immediately stakes her claim, leaving Yuta trapped in the middle. He reflects that their 10-day search has made things very, very complicated. But for now, they put the drama aside to celebrate finding the stairs. And Misuzu knows exactly how she wants to celebrate. With the gacha. She declares this is what she lives for, much to Iwai's complete lack of surprise. Iwai asks how many coins they managed to collect during their search. Misuzu proudly announces she found 19, while Yuta only managed 3. But with a radiant smile, she happily offers to share her winnings with him. Misuzu questions his decision, reminding him of his legendary gacha luck. But Yuta explains that he needs to be the one to pull for their gear. Iwai listens, understanding his logic completely. The gacha can sometimes drop unique named equipment for a specific person, and collecting a full set of this gear unlocks a powerful hidden effect. Legendary items like bows and powerful swords are all up for grabs. But Yuta realizes the gear can only be used by the one who pulls it. So much for sharing the wealth. Misuzu insists that his luck is still better than any lottery ticket, and she holds up their combined total of 23 coins. She declares that this is the true thrill of being an explorer. And after 230 pulls, she's left with nothing but junk. Though for someone with her luck, even this is a miracle. Iwai looks on, knowing there's still more to come. Misuzu begs Evie for just one more coin to try her luck. But Evie decides to show her how it's done, with 110 tries of her own, and promptly gets 1 bronze prize and a whole lot of nothing. Misuzu and her summon can only laugh at the spectacular failure. So now Iwai is the one begging Yuta for a single coin. Yuta just wants to escape as the girls argue over a metal bat. Yuta holds up his 8 coins, ready for 80 pulls. He steels himself, determined to make every single one count. And on his very first try, a golden capsule rolls out. A sight that leaves both Misuzu and Iwai completely stunned. Yuta just smiles, relieved his legendary luck is holding out. The girls can only watch in envy, wishing they had his gift. After 80 pulls, his haul is nothing short of incredible. Potions, skill scrolls, and even a rare stat-boosting fruit. A result that leaves the others lamenting their own terrible luck. But the most important prize of all was something else entirely. A piece of exclusive equipment, a katana named Bibimaru. A close-up reveals its intricate, powerful design. The girls are ecstatic, asking if his stats have changed. Yuta just smiles, telling them to see for themselves. And just by equipping 2 new items, 4 of his stats have skyrocketed. A boost that would make any RPG player weep, but Yuta seems troubled. He explains that when leveling up, the situation is everything. He recalls the difference between his own brutal training and Misuzu's safer one. He's heard that the dungeon sometimes restricts those who are too powerful too early. Misuzu asks if that's a bad thing, but Yuta clarifies it's about their party's balance. Misuzu points out he won all this with the 3 coins she gave him. He holds up the stat-boosting fruit, a legendary prize. Iwai explains that an item like that is practically priceless. Yuta can only apologize, admitting his luck is just that broken. A fact that leaves the other 2 completely and utterly crushed. He theorizes his luck is meant to balance out their terrible fortune. So he'll hold on to the fruit until one of them needs it more. Evie asks if he's absolutely sure about this decision. But Yuta insists that the entire party needs to level up together. His selfless words leave the girls completely moved by his leadership. Iwai suddenly leans in, giving Yuta a kiss on the cheek. She admits she's starting to like his cautious but lucky nature, a move that leaves Misuzu completely and utterly horrified. She immediately stakes her claim, declaring that Yuta is her boyfriend, and she pulls him into a hug, confessing her feelings all over again. Yuta can only stammer, trying to refuse another drink, but it's too late, as Misuzu has already passed out in his lap. Levi just tells him to relax because this party is far from over. She reassures him that she won't be number one in his heart, because Misuzu is clearly number two. A comment that brings back a very painful, very recent memory for Yuta. She asks if he has a problem with her being number three. Yuta wonders why he's suddenly the center of attention. Levi explains that she believes in a mysterious kind of fate. A flashback reveals her dream to become like a legendary dragon, a dream she has held onto for her entire life. And she believes Yuta is the key to finally achieving it. A confession that leaves our boy completely overwhelmed. He can only wonder why his life has become so complicated. The next morning, the scene shifts back to school, where Imari walks, completely unaware of the recent drama. Misuzu worries about leaving Yuta and Levi alone, noting how strange he was acting. But she steels her resolve, vowing that she'll never let anyone take him from her. Her thoughts are interrupted as a familiar voice calls out her name. It's her friend from school, waving her over. Misuzu greets her friend Koharu with a simple hello. Koharu immediately asks if the rumors are true, that Misuzu really entered a dungeon and reached level 3. The news leaves her completely stunned, comparing Misuzu to a heavyweight champion. As they walk, Misuzu admits she's not the impressive one, mentioning Yuta's own incredible feats. She clarifies that she's talking about their quiet classmate, Rokuju Yuta, a revelation that leaves her friend completely and utterly horrified. Koharu mentions Misuzu's plan to return to the dungeon in just 3 days. She asks if Misuzu is really skipping the D-rank dungeon, still trying to process the news. She's shocked that Misuzu is letting herself be held back by Rokuju Yuta. Misuzu turns back, her expression hardening at the comment. Koharu explains that Yuta is just the kid who's always tormented by Ikamoto. But Misuzu fiercely defends him, declaring that Yuta is the strongest in their party. Koharu can't believe that the pathetic boy she knows could be so powerful, a revelation that completely short-circuits her brain. Misuzu recalls Yuta explaining that his luck could also be a disadvantage, and she finally understands why he never wanted to stand out. Koharu suddenly gets intense, demanding to join Yuta's party. Misuzu can only ask what's gotten into her friend. But their conversation is cut short as other students swarm her. Koharu's expression twists into a dark, knowing grin, as she accuses Misuzu of just using Yuta for his luck. Just then, the classroom door slams open with a loud crash. A familiar figure looks over at the commotion. It's their old tormentor, Ikamoto, annoyed by the noise. Another student tells him that Kiriyama has finally returned to school, a revelation that leaves the bully completely speechless. Ikamoto's fist clenches, his knuckles turning white with rage. He sneers at the news that Rokuju Yuta has reached level 3. The bully stumbles back, realizing their party might actually be a threat. One of his friends calls out his name in concern. He asks if Ikamoto is actually crying. The tormentor explodes, screaming at them not to look down on him. He slumps against the wall as his friend calls out his first name, Kazuya. Ikamoto can only glare back, demanding to know what he wants. Just then, Koharu approaches with a deceptively sweet smile. She asks if they'd like to help her teach Yuta a painful lesson. Koharu concludes that Misuzu must be under some kind of spell from Yuta. Ikamoto's friend insists that he's the only one who can save her. The bully is completely convinced, seeing Yuta as a villain who must be stopped. He promises to beat some sense back into our boy. For justice. The scene shifts to a city in ruins, with a reporter broadcasting live. Yuta watches the news as the death toll climbs past 10,000. The next morning, Imari brings him a cup of coffee. She calmly informs him that their parents have officially divorced. Yuta can only stare, completely stunned by the sudden news. She explains their financial situation, before wishing a grim fate upon her own mother. Yuta worries that her mother will be left with nothing, but Imari just scoffs that she hates the woman. He sighs, promising to make sure she'll be okay, much to Imari's complete shock. Yuta just looks back, asking why she's so surprised by his decision. A flashback reveals his own father's rage, screaming at him for looking so much like his mother. A younger Yuta could only ask if that was such a bad thing. His father's words echo, filled with the bitterness of being left behind. Yuta recalls never understanding that anger, only the kindness of the mother he lost. But his stepmother was different, always offering comfort and praise. She was just happy that he saw her as family. A concept lost on his actual dad. And back in the present, Yuta's resolve is set. Imari is completely flustered by his kindness. She explains her uncle will help pay for the apartment. Yuta considers moving since his father is gone. His suggestion leaves her completely speechless. She declares that wherever he goes, she'll follow, a statement that flies completely over our boy's head. She gets angry, thinking he's misunderstood her completely. He finally realizes she's terrified of being abandoned, and he promises he'd never leave her, because they're family. His simple words are all the reassurance she needs. Imari thanks him with a quick kiss on the cheek before heading off to school. Yuta can only think that her affection is a little intense for a stepsister. His attention turns back to the news, which questions the cause of a new war. The report speculates that the legendary dragon god is the one who started it. Yuta reflects on the news, realizing things in Yokohama are getting serious. His eyes narrow, a sudden thought crossing his mind. He decides to call Nagumo, hoping for answers and a chance to thank him. He nervously answers the call, offering a flustered good morning. But his worrywart skill activates, filling him with a sudden sense of dread. He panics, telling Nagumo to wait as he tries to guess what's wrong. But Nagumo's voice comes through, asking for love advice of all things. He complains about being pestered by the two beautiful women with him. He yells at Fumiko to be quiet, saying he's on an important call with a friend. Yuta can only sweat, wondering what's happening on Nagumo's end. Nagumo tells Fumiko to leave his friend alone, calling her a nuisance. He then asks Yuta if they're really friends. Yuta, completely flustered, enthusiastically agrees that they are. And on the news, a live broadcast shows Nagumo in the middle of a war zone. He's in the middle of the Yokohama ruins, screaming into the phone. His expression is one of pure, unadulterated fury. The elf descends from the sky, warning that their opponent is here. Nagumo is completely flustered, but admits he's happy to be Yuta's friend. But a sudden flash of light cuts their conversation short. The elf unleashes a powerful magical assault, and the entire battlefield erupts in a storm of energy. A blur of motion cuts through the chaos. As the ground itself shatters from the impact, Nagumo yells into the phone that he's a little busy at the moment. Just a casual warzone chat. He tells Yuta he has to go, but he's glad he called. A small, knowing smile crosses his face as the call ends. Nagumo grins, declaring he's finally getting fired up. He decides to unleash one of his more spectacular attacks. A brilliant light shines down as he calls out his skill, and unleashes a devastating wave of pure fire, all to fight a massive skeletal beast in the city ruins. Yuta watches the live broadcast, seeing the sky turn red. The feed glitches, but the horror is still perfectly clear. He nearly spits out his drink in complete and utter shock. He can only conclude that Nagumo is on another level entirely, and the scene shifts to a crowded temple on a new day. The scene shifts to the Asakusa dungeon, where new portals have opened. A newspaper headline announces the death of the legendary Thunder God. Imari is shocked by the news, but Yuta insists the Dragon God couldn't lose. The battle in Yokohama claimed over 10,000 lives, but the Dragon God was victorious. Imari realizes the Thunder God must have used a resurrection potion to survive, because losing a level 90 explorer would be a devastating blow to Japan. And now everyone wants a resurrection potion, a perfect insurance policy for their loved ones. Imari suddenly remembers something as they walk. She asks about Yuta's school uniform, and he admits he was trying to blend in. She complains about Misuzu's friend Koharu, wishing this could have been a real date. He admits he doesn't really like wearing his school uniform. It brings back too many painful memories of being tormented. Imari looks on, her expression unreadable for a moment. But she just grabs him, insisting that it's perfectly fine. She tells him that she loves him no matter what he wears. A flustered Yuta can only offer a quiet thank you. But their moment is cut short as Imari spots a familiar face. It's Ikamoto, standing with Koharu, a cruel smile on his face. Because of course his bully is here to ruin the day. Yuta's eyes widen in a flash of pure panic, as the memories of his torment come flooding back. Ikamoto's friends mock him, calling it a friendly wrestling move. He grabs Yuta's arm, trying to drag him away from the scene. But this time, Yuta's fist clenches with a newfound strength. Imari can only watch in horror as the situation escalates. She tells Yuta to wait, promising to go talk to Koharu, but Ikamoto's grip on his arm only tightens. Imari pleads with Yuta not to get angry, insisting she didn't call them. Yuta tries to explain that he's not mad at her. He's just furious at the very sight of his old tormentor. Ikamoto's friend just taunts him, telling him to hurry up and watch. He tells Misuzu to stay back, his anger finally boiling over. And with a sharp twist, he breaks free from Ikamoto's grasp. The bully just laughs, asking if he's gotten cocky. He sneers that Yuta only acts tough because Misuzu is around. But Yuta worries that if he gets serious, he might actually kill him. Koharu chimes in, saying she never thought Yuta and Misuzu were a good match. And our boy finally understands what's happening. A classic high school team-up. He realizes they're both just looking down on him and Imari. Imari steps in saying they'll go shopping, but she has one condition. Yuta agrees, knowing they need to avoid attracting any more unwanted attention. The friend taunts him, asking if he's gotten scared, but Yuta moves in a blur, striking him in the gut. His eyes are cold, his patience finally gone. He tells Ikamoto that he understands why they mock him. The bully recalls the weakling from 2 weeks ago. Yuta screams that at least Ikamoto has people who would cry if he died, a statement that leaves his tormentor completely baffled. He warns them to stay away from the dungeon if they value their lives. Ikamoto grits his teeth, agreeing to meet Misuzu in 2 days. And Yuta realizes the kick he took earlier didn't hurt at all. He reflects on the confrontation, as Imari watches with concern. He realizes he wasn't scared of Ikamoto in the slightest. He wonders why he could kill goblins but couldn't hurt a human. Imari calls out his name, sensing his inner conflict. He decides not to burden Misuzu with these dark thoughts, so they push the incident aside and enter the shop, deciding to focus on getting some new gear instead. Their first stop is a display case with a very expensive necklace. Yuta looks around, still feeling out of place among the other explorers. He waits nervously outside the changing room, which is currently occupied. Imari emerges, showing off her brand new explorer gear. Yuta can only offer a flustered, awkward round of applause. He tells her he's going to get changed as well. And with a quick swipe of a card, their preparations are finally complete. Imari asks if he's sure about buying her all this gear. She smiles, realizing just how much Yuta knows about this world. But their quiet moment is shattered by a panicked Koharu. Imari looks over, completely stunned by her sudden appearance. Koharu screams that Ikamoto has gone into the dungeon. And just like that, Yuta and Imari are back in the familiar savannah. Yuta asks if Ikamoto even went in with the right gear, but Koharu just shrugs, saying she has no idea. She waves it off as if his life is a minor inconvenience. She screams that since Yuta is level 3, he has to save him. Just then, Ikamoto's friend pulls out a very real firearm. He explains the plan is just to warn Yuta away from Misuzu. Koharu begs him to go, reminding him that dungeons are lawless, but Yuta can only refuse, knowing it's a trap. He apologizes, admitting he lied about his level, a lie he told just to save face in front of his tormentor. Koharu is stunned, asking what this means for Misuzu. Imari admits she also thought it was a good idea to lie in front of everyone. The horrible realization dawns on Koharu, that Ikamoto is now in mortal danger. She begs Yuta, telling him he can't just lie about something like this. But Yuta turns on her, saying she should have been the one to stop him. Koharu panics, realizing her entire plan has just backfired spectacularly. The scene shifts as 2 shadowy figures watch Yuta walk away. Elsewhere, a group of high-level explorers remarks on a cautious level 3. They decide it's best to stay away from him, sensing it would only end badly for them. One of them smirks, remarking that a fool is much easier to train. The other girl looks on in absolute terror, calling out for her sister. The woman introduces herself as Kagura, offering her help to the girl. She smiles, promising that she will be the one to save them. The party decides on a 3-day break before tackling the second floor. For team-building exercises, Evie looks back on her day with Yuta, admitting she had a great time. Yuta can only look away, completely drained by the experience. She leans in close, asking if she's invading his personal space. He panics, worried that he's already losing his focus. Evie scolds him, telling him to get serious before they enter the dungeon. Imari asks if he's angry, but Yuta just apologizes. Ikamoto's friend explains he saw the bully in Asakusa. He thought if Yuta could level up, he could do it too. Yuta grimly states that his tormentor probably isn't coming back. His fist clenches as he remembers the one who tormented him, a realization that leaves Imari completely stunned. He recalls the daily humiliation, the constant beatings, and admits that because he hated him, he just left him to die. Karma's a real dungeon boss. He knew the horror of being abandoned, but still chose to do nothing. After all, when he was the one suffering, no one ever came to help him. Imari can only stare, stunned by his dark confession. He admits he thought it was a good thing, and that she shouldn't fall for someone so cruel. She asks why he's the one who's crying. He touches his face, surprised by his own tears. He can't understand why he feels this way. But Imari suddenly throws her arms around him. He calls out her name, asking if she's all right. She admits she wouldn't save someone she hated either. At least they're on the same moral page. A man torn between his guilt and his relief. She smiles, calling him a kind person. But she tells him he needs to learn to love himself more. The next day, Evie's bodyguard asks Yuta if he enjoyed himself. Evie immediately scolds Mark for his crude line of questioning, but he insists that spending a night with her is a rare opportunity. The other bodyguard chimes in, calling Yuta a lucky boy. Yuta can only stammer that they just held hands and slept. As one does. A response that leaves her security detail completely baffled. They press him, asking if that's really all that happened. And they erupt in laughter, teasing Evi that she's already lost to Misuzu. Mark offers Yuta some perfume to cover up Evi's scent. But Evie points out he'll just smell like Mark instead. A definite downgrade. The bodyguards drive off, laughing at how adorable Yuta is. Yuta stands before the Kofu dungeon, ready for their 3-day trip. Mark gives him a thumbs up, promising to contact Imari for him. And with a final wave, they tell him not to die. Standard parting words. Yuta can only watch them go, still processing the chaos. He turns to face the swirling portal, his resolve hardening, and steps through into the familiar savanna of the first floor, leaving Misuzu and Evie to wonder why he just ditched them at the entrance. Evi asks if Misuzu has heard anything from our boy, but Misuzu's suspicious glance tells a different story. Evie explains that Yuta's sudden 3-day plan is all because of her. Standard supermodel problems. Just then, Misuzu notices Evi's brand new gear. Evi smiles, asking if Yuta bought Misuzu's outfit as well. Misuzu confirms it, promising to pay him back later. Evi just smirks, saying she knows because they were together yesterday. A quiet, thoughtful sigh escapes her lips. Yuta, meanwhile, announces he's going ahead to grind some levels. Evie watches him go, deciding to match his pace, much to Misuzu's annoyance. Misuzu's eyes narrow with intense focus, as Evi matches her determined gaze. The two fight back to back, a whirlwind of coordinated attacks. Misuzu offers a quiet compliment on Evi's impressive skills. They regroup, asking if any more monsters are nearby. The scene shifts as Misuzu recalls a phone call she received from Imari. Imari was on the other end, screaming that she'd never hand Yuta over. Standard sibling rivalry stuff. Misuzu explains the intense family drama to a concerned Evi. Imari then revealed that Yuta didn't come home last night. A piece of news that leaves Misuzu completely baffled. Evi's bodyguards laugh, teasing Yuta about his terrible lying skills. Evi admits she was just messing with him because she wanted a male companion. But Misuzu calls her out on the lie. As she takes aim with her own firearm, the nearby goblins are completely ignored. As the barrel of the gun swings around and points directly at a very surprised Evi, through tears, Misuzu begs her to stay away from Yuta. Evi tries to calm her down, but Misuzu refuses to listen. A totally normal team-building exercise. Evi can only sigh, realizing this has gone way too far. Evie fires back, accusing Misuzu of trying to monopolize the only guy in their party. She then declares that she and Yuta spent the entire night together. Their argument echoes across the empty savannah. A perfectly normal team dynamic. Evi is furious, asking if Misuzu is trying to insult her, but Misuzu just screams back, refusing to listen to any more excuses. And their bickering has attracted some very unwanted attention. A goblin seizes the opportunity, grabbing Misuzu from behind. But a single shot takes the creature down instantly. The two put their fight on hold, realizing they're completely surrounded. As the roars of more monsters echo through the vast landscape, the ground is littered with the bodies of defeated goblins. The two sit back to back, finally agreeing to stop fighting in the dungeon. Misuzu looks down, quietly apologizing for saying too much. Evie admits that nothing happened with Yuta, because he was too worried about Misuzu to even look at her. Misuzu realizes that Evi is telling the truth about Yuta's feelings. She asks if it's really true, and Evi just scoffs at her doubt. Misuzu admits this is the first time she's ever felt so strongly for someone. Evi looks away, admitting she hates her own indecisiveness. She then asks if Misuzu is going to keep using her as an excuse. And with a smile, she admits she's actually into cruel men. A perfectly healthy preference. Misuzu is left completely stunned by Evi's confession. Evi explains that trying to monopolize the dungeon is a bad idea. She then playfully asks if Misuzu would get mad if she kissed Yuta too. Misuzu screams that she can't listen anymore, calling a supermodel rival completely unfair. And as Yuta walks on ahead, the two continue their bickering. Their journey eventually leads them to a quiet, flowing river. Yuta turns back, asking why they both look so completely drained. He suggests they take a break and go for a swim. For team morale. The girls agree, telling him to keep watch, and that he can peek if he wants, leaving our boy to wonder what just happened and why they seem to be having so much fun. The two girls share a laugh, their rivalry seemingly settled for now. Yuta is completely lost as Rin explains their next objective. A quiet moment of anticipation hangs in the air, and before them stands the entrance to the second floor. Yuta excitedly explains the savannah continues for 5 more floors. For variety, but Misuzu is more concerned with the sudden oppressive heat. He confirms the temperature is rising, a sign of things to come. For now, they can only push forward through the endless landscape. Their new goal is to find the next stairs while reaching level 7. But Yuta's expression shifts, sensing a new kind of challenge. A quest. Rin, completely lost, asks what a quest even is. Evi explains it's a special challenge with a very special reward. Her quest: solo a pack of goblin riders by level 5 using only magic and swords. Misuzu realizes how critical their next levels will be, seeing her own quest reward. Yuta's quest offers a similar massive boost to his stats. The party moves through the savannah, the weight of their new objective settling in. They know that as they grow stronger, so will their enemies. And right on cue, a new kind of welcoming committee appears. A fearsome goblin rider, mounted on a massive white lion. They travel in organized cavalry units, a serious upgrade from the usual cannon fodder. Unlike the goblins on the first floor, these creatures have a much darker purpose. The lion is not just a mount, but a loyal companion. And they leave behind grim trophies of their previous victims. Misuzu looks to Yuta, asking what their next move is. But Yuta knows they can't back down if they want to reach their goal. Their plan is to take on all 4 riders at once. But Evi points out the massive level gap and the restrictions on Yuta. His quest forbids firearms, limiting his stat growth if he relies on them. Misuzu declares she'll follow his lead, but Evi tells her to think for herself. And just like that, the party's strategizing devolves into another argument. Evi cuts in, saying they're a party and everyone needs to contribute. Even Rin agrees that Yuta's plan is incredibly risky. Yuta takes a moment, then agrees to a new strategy. They'll start with skills and magic, but signal if they need the rifle. The girls agree, teasing him about his signals. For team morale. So they separate to coordinate their movements and sync their watches. Hiding behind a lone tree in the vast savannah, they watch their targets gather by the water's edge. One of the goblins calls out, trying to lure its prey from the bushes. And Yuta, playing the part of the bait, prepares to make his move. Rin nervously wishes him luck, her face filled with concern. Yuta checks his watch, confirming the operation begins at 9 o'clock. And as the clock strikes the hour, a signal flashes across the vast savannah. Misuzu's fire arrow finds its mark, taking out the first rider. Yuta immediately charges forward, closing the distance. He and Misuzu unleash a flurry of coordinated strikes. He confirms their plan worked. 4 targets, all on foot. But the dismounted goblins are far from defeated, and they turn their collective rage on the party. Yuta looks on, his expression filled with alarm. He holds up 3 fingers, signaling the remaining targets. The remaining goblins charge forward with furious roars. As Misuzu confirms that 3 are heading straight for Evi, Misuzu takes aim, unleashing another one of her refined shots. The arrow finds its mark with devastating precision. She celebrates the perfect hit, her confidence soaring. But the remaining creatures are far from intimidated. Yuta yells for Misuzu to target the lions, realizing they're too fast. Evi screams, completely overwhelmed by their speed. Misuzu screams as one of the lions lunges at Evi. Evi spins around, barely managing to raise her blade. She grits her teeth, struggling to hold back the powerful beast. Yuta and Rin can only watch in horror, calling out their names. Another lion pounces, unleashing a powerful shockwave. Yuta scrambles back, realizing their formation has been completely shattered. His eyes widen as he senses a new presence behind him. He turns to find the goblin rider captain looming over him. So much for a fair fight. The creature lets out a silent, menacing laugh. Yuta's face drains of color as he realizes the captain is activating a skill. Yuta unleashes his double strike, clashing with the captain's blade. The creature's eyes widen in complete disbelief, but Yuta is just as shocked, realizing his skill was completely blocked. He turns in a panic as a scream echoes from the side. Rin is completely overwhelmed by the other goblins, and in an instant, the summon dissolves into nothingness. The captain remounts its lion, charging straight for Yuta. Its roar echoes across the savannah, filled with triumphant rage. But Yuta's eyes widen, realizing he's made a terrible mistake. This floor is on a completely different level than the last one. Yuta's mind races, realizing their entire plan has just fallen apart. He sees Evi on the ground, about to be finished off by a goblin. His eyes widen in a flash of pure, unadulterated panic. He screams out her name as she struggles against the powerful beast. He yells for her to unsummon Rin before the creature can land a fatal blow. Evi screams the command, her voice filled with desperation. And in a puff of dark energy, the summon vanishes from the battlefield. Evi looks on, relieved but still trapped in the middle of the fight. Yuta lets out a sigh, glad that at least one of them is safe. But his relief is cut short as an arrow slams directly into Evi's side. Yuta can only stare in absolute horror. The goblin archer takes aim once more, but another arrow finds its mark first. Yuta screams out Misuzu's name as she stumbles, badly wounded. He calls out to her again, his voice filled with panic. His fear quickly turns into pure, unadulterated rage. His grip on the katana tightens, ignoring the chaos around him, and he unleashes a furious flurry of strikes. He cuts through the enemy but knows it's not enough. He's panting, realizing his energy is almost completely gone. His hand is bleeding, his body screaming at him to stop. So he makes a choice, pulling out the firearm he swore not to use, and unleashes a hail of bullets across the battlefield. When the dust settles, the monsters are finally gone. Levi drinks a potion, with Rin helping her recover. Misuzu looks on, realizing just how close they came to the end. She admits that the fight was far more dangerous than she ever imagined. She thanks Yuta, knowing his gun was the only thing that saved them, but he just apologizes, blaming his own poor judgment for the disaster. Misuzu calculates the cost of their survival, a staggering 32 million yen in potions. Yuta can only stare, realizing the financial weight of a single mistake. To reach level 5, they'll need to solo at least 15 more of those creatures. Levi reminds them that without risk, there are no skills, but if you die, it's all over. Simple dungeon math. The girls immediately start arguing over who gets the next power-up, as Yuta begs them to calm down. They both turn on him, demanding he make the final call. But Yuta admits that now that he's fought them once, he understands their patterns. Misuzu celebrates, happy that her more aggressive strategy was chosen. Levi immediately yells at them to stop flirting in the middle of a strategy meeting, and Yuta realizes he's once again the cause of their bickering. He yells at them to stop fighting over him. Misuzu tells him to be quiet, leaving Yuta completely flustered. She turns away with an annoyed pout, and the two girls resume their silent, intense standoff. Yuta tries to get them to focus on their strategy, but concludes he will never understand the female mind. You and every other guy in your situation, kid? Levi just smirks, enjoying the chaos she's created. The scene shifts to two figures overlooking the city. It's Levi's bodyguards, reporting that the party has already reached level 5. Imari looks on, relieved to hear that Yuta is doing well. Mark asks if she'll join the party once her birthday arrives. She thinks to herself that she won't let another woman take Yuta. He tells her not to worry, and that the others have already reached level 10. The other bodyguard laughs, admitting he wouldn't want to fight a level 5 Yuta. Imari looks up, surprised by how strong her stepbrother has become. Meanwhile, Yuta stands like a hero, knowing he can't leave the girls behind. Imari can only offer a quiet, hesitant agreement. She stands by her door, a wave of unease washing over her. Her hand clenches, realizing the other girls are with him while she's stuck waiting. And her resolve hardens, knowing she has to join them as soon as possible. But Misuzu suddenly flinches, a strange feeling washing over her. Yuta asks what's wrong, and she admits to a sudden, unexplainable chill. He checks on Levi, who insists she's fine despite the toll of leveling up. Levi notes that her summon, Rin, is acting like a worried mother. Yuta looks on, deciding to put his faith in their new plan. A plan that involves sending Rin out to fight the riders all by herself. The little goblin just lets out a sleepy yawn, completely unfazed. A true professional. Levi gives her the order, take down just one of them with the rifle. Rin's expression immediately sharpens with focus, and she takes aim, ready to execute the plan perfectly. Rin unleashes a hail of bullets across the battlefield. Her small frame handles the weapon with surprising ease. She reloads with a practiced, deadly efficiency, and another goblin falls, taken down by a perfect shot. The gun fires again, its report echoing across the savannah. The remaining goblin can only stare in shock at the carnage. Its captain lets out a furious, desperate roar. But Rin is already prepared for the next phase of the fight. A summon with a gun and a giant axe. Totally balanced. Evie just smiles, announcing that her summon has leveled up. A realization that leaves the rest of the party completely stunned, with a quiet sound of satisfaction. Yuta confirms that the entire party has finally reached level 5. But he turns to find both girls staring at him with hearts in their eyes. Misuzu is ecstatic, declaring that her Yuta has gotten even more handsome. Levi agrees, proudly noting the boost to his charisma stat. But the truce is immediately broken as Misuzu reminds Levi that Yuta is her boyfriend. And they both turn on him, demanding he finally choose between them. A question that sends our boy into a complete and total panic. He's trapped in a no-win situation, his mind completely short-circuiting. He can only apologize, admitting he can't possibly make a choice. The one answer guaranteed to make things worse. But Yuta finally makes his choice, declaring he'll be with Misuzu. He apologizes to Iwai, who can only stare back in disbelief. She can only manage a weak, stunned agreement. Misuzu immediately hugs Yuta, apologizing for her selfishness, leaving Iwai completely speechless and flustered by the turn of events. Even her own summon asks if she just got rejected. You know, for moral support. A question that sends the entire party into another meltdown. And so the next few days are spent in a haze of bickering. But through trial and error, they slowly adapt to the new floor. They reach level 5 with ease, finally ready to take on their quests. Misuzu lies in wait, hidden in the tall grass. Her target, a massive pack of 17 goblin riders. Her quest is to take them all down by herself. You know, a totally reasonable first solo mission. She checks her phone, admitting the pressure is getting to her. The map confirms Yuta and Evie are also on their own quests. She recalls how they all agreed this was a bit much. But as she stares at the screen, a strange feeling takes hold. She realizes that neither of them have moved an inch. Their icons just sit there, completely stationary on the map. And a horrifying thought begins to dawn on her. She worries that Yuta and Iwai might have met up without her. But she tries to rationalize it, knowing they'd need the map app. She tells herself that Yuta wouldn't just abandon her like that. And a small, confident smile crosses her face. She wonders when she became this kind of woman. You know, character development. With her resolve hardened, she checks the time and prepares for her quest. She draws her bow, her focus absolute, combining her refined shot with a brand new skill. She unleashes a powerful attack called Steel Bow. The first of her many targets can only roar in shock. The arrow finds its mark with deadly precision and erupts in a blast of magical energy, leaving the other goblins to scream in absolute terror. Misuzu notes her range has increased, allowing her to pick them off safely. Her plan is simple: thin the herd without ever being detected. A flashback reveals a quiet moment before the quest began. Evie had worried that this safe approach would stunt their growth, but Yuta insisted, saying he had a feeling about this. You know, a gut feeling that's probably a skill. He explained that the key to Misuzu's quest was time, because unlike most challenges, this one had no time limit at all, so she waits a full 30 minutes between each shot. The goblins, with their terrible attention spans, forget they're even in danger, and another arrow finds its mark with perfect precision. The remaining creatures can only panic as their numbers dwindle. She'll just keep thinning the herd, exactly as Yuta planned. He knew that neither he nor Iwai could handle this kind of long-range fight, as another arrow slams into its target. A devastating, unseen attack. But for Misuzu, this is the perfect stage to shine. She knows she can clear the quest this way, but it's going to take a while. But she decides to speed things up with a more direct approach. She unleashes another combination of her steel bow and refined shot, sending a spiraling arrow of pure energy across the savannah. The attack slams into another goblin with devastating force. The creature can only stare, completely stunned by her power. But her position is finally revealed as another goblin spots her. She quickly drinks a potion, knowing the captain is the real threat. She recalls Yuta's warning that the captain can block skills. You know, a classic boss mechanic. So she changes her target, aiming for the creature's mount instead. And her arrow finds its mark, a perfect shot to the lion's head. The goblin captain can only watch as its mount is taken down. She recalls Evie's advice to save the leader for last, and watches as the rest of the pack falls into chaos. One by one, her arrows find their mark with deadly accuracy. It takes her 3 long hours, but her patience pays off. And with one final shot, she declares the hunt is over. A familiar notification appears, confirming her quest is complete. She celebrates her A-rank victory, a new skill, and a massive stat boost. The system then offers to combine her new skill with an old one. You know, a classic RPG feature. She happily accepts, eager to tell Yuta about her new power-up. But her celebration is interrupted by a sudden call. Yuta answers, asking if she's okay and announcing he's finished his quest. He asks about her results, proudly revealing he earned an S rank. Misuzu then asks if he's heard anything from Iwai. Yuta's expression turns serious, explaining she's still in the middle of her quest. And speak of the devil, Iwai appears right behind him. Yuta stammers an apology, thinking a goblin somehow survived. But Rin just gives him a deadpan look, clarifying she is not a goblin. Evie just smiles, showing off the new summoning item she won from her quest, and introduces her new companion, a massive lion that can travel over 100 kilometers per hour. Iwai offers him a ride on her new lion, leaving Yuta completely flustered. But Misuzu suddenly throws her arms around him. She admits that his words from before had brought her to tears. Yuta can only apologize, saying he had to make a choice. So she leans in, silencing him with a kiss. She tells him not to make her hear those words again, promising she'll be more careful not to force his hand. She asks if he's okay with that, holding him tighter, because she has absolutely no intention of giving up on him. And our boy recalls Nagumo's advice to just date them all. You know, a totally simple solution. Misuzu holds on, asking if he thinks she's being too persistent. Yuta can only sweat, completely out of his depth. He clenches his fist, not wanting to hurt anyone's feelings. He admits he's too indecisive to just abandon Evi, so Evi suggests a solution, if Misuzu is okay with it. You know, the totally simple harem route, a solution our boy would prefer to avoid if possible. But Evi just smiles, promising to help him by making him like her more. A declaration that leaves Yuta completely stunned, just as his phone buzzes, sending him into a panic. He answers a call from Misuzu, who's found the stairs to the 3rd floor. Evi reflects that back in America, she was never chosen, and she never realized how terrifying that feeling could be. But for now, she'll focus on reaching level 100 with Yuta, hoping that in the end, he'll be the one to choose her. With their new mounts, the party takes off at incredible speed. Their lions tear through the tall grass of the savannah. Yuta can only marvel at how fast they're moving. A new sense of excitement fills his eyes. They travel together, a proper adventuring party at last. You know, with giant cat taxis. Yuta draws his blade, ready for whatever comes next. He cuts through the remaining goblins with practiced ease. He can't help but smile, realizing the riders now feel incredibly slow. Their new mounts have completely changed the way they can fight. And with their victory, a familiar notification appears for the party. Yuta happily checks his stats, confirming he's finally reached level 7. Evie has also leveled up, telling him not to praise her new mount too much. Even Rin gets a power-up, though she seems more interested in her cake. Misuzu reminds them she found the stairs, all while inhaling a bowl of ramen. And speaking of mounts, Evie's lion can now take on a human form. You know, as lions do. A form that seems to be settling in just fine. Rin, in her new human form, questions her own existence. With their quests done and the next stairs found, they decide to take a break after 16 long days. But Misuzu has one last thing she needs to do first. It's time for their 3rd trip to the Gacha Tower. She holds up their massive haul of coins, completely ecstatic. Because of course she does. Evi can only sigh at her friend's crippling addiction. Between the 3 of them, they've gathered a small fortune, 80 coins in total, for a staggering 800 pulls. And 3 stone machines stand ready to deliver their prizes. Misuzu points out the machines have changed, now offering multi-pulls. So Evi suggests they pool their coins and let Yuta do all the work. But Yuta knows they need to pull for their own exclusive gear. Misuzu still insists on giving him 10 of her coins anyway. He worries she's pushing herself too hard, but she quickly denies it. She just wants to pay Evi back for the gear she borrowed. So they decide on an order, with Misuzu eagerly volunteering to go first. She takes a deep breath, ready to test her notoriously bad luck. And with a prayer to the Gacha gods, she begins her pulls. 200 tries later, she's left with a mountain of junk. As is tradition, Evi tells her to get a grip, as her Gacha haul is basically just a grocery run. Defeated, Misuzu offers her remaining coins to Yuta. He's surprised, telling her this isn't like her at all. He insists she has to be the one to pull for her own gear, but she clenches her fist, afraid she'll just hold the party back. So Yuta asks if she knows how many people challenge the dungeons. She tearfully guesses about 1 billion, but he explains that only 12 have ever reached level 1000. Because most explorers learn the hard way not to take foolish risks. He asks what she's really aiming for, forcing her to face her own ambition. She repeats the number 12, the weight of that impossible goal finally sinking in. But Yuta just smiles, telling her that's exactly why they need her. Misuzu looks down, admitting that Gacha luck isn't something you can just share. She apologizes for her weakness, realizing he never meant to pressure her. So with renewed determination, she agrees to try again, much to Evi's annoyance. And after 230 pulls, she's left buried in a pile of duds. So much for renewed determination. Evi sighs, stepping up to say it's her turn to fund their expedition. But her luck is just as terrible, leaving the 2 girls to bond over their shared failure. So Yuta finally steps up, ready to show them how it's done with his 340 pulls. And his results are immediately, overwhelmingly different. His pulls yield a staggering number of gold and silver prizes. And when the final results are tallied, he's won 2 pieces of his exclusive Bibimaru armor set. A haul that leaves the other 2 completely in the dust. Later, they ride back to the city in style. But Misuzu and Evi can only glare, their jealousy palpable. They complain that he's taking too long with the Gacha. You know, the one he's winning for all of them. Yuta explains that even the potions he won feel different. He even pulled a magic scroll and some stamina enhancers. But Ivi suddenly looks up from her screen, her expression stunned. She reveals the total value of his haul is over 168 million yen. The stamina enhancers are actually a rare fertility aid, a fact that leaves our boy completely and utterly mortified. Ivi snatches it, teasing that it's only useful in a harem party. Misuzu happily calculates their profits. As Yuta processes the implication, Rin celebrates their new wealth, but Misuzu reminds her of their expenses. After potions and gear, they're actually in the red for their next trip. So she suggests they sell the stat-boosting fruit Yuta won, an item that's worth a minimum of 200 million yen. After paying off their debts, they're left with a staggering profit. Misuzu lays out their budget for the next trip, listing off potions and gear. Ivi happily announces their remaining funds, suggesting they split it as an allowance. She proposes a generous split, with the lion's share going directly to Yuta. Misuzu is completely stunned by her 10 million yen cut. A quick breakdown shows everyone's contribution, with Yuta's luck funding the entire operation. You know, a balanced team. Ivi cheerfully ends the financial discussion, asking what's next. But Misuzu looks hesitant, with something else on her mind. She nervously suggests that she and Yuta should spend the night at a hotel, a request that leaves both Yuta and Ivi completely speechless. She recalls Yuta staying with Ivi, determined to even the playing field. Yuta is a flustered mess, trying to find the right words. She asks if it's really so wrong to want to be alone with him. He stammers that it's not a bad idea, completely overwhelmed by the request. Ivi just lets out a quiet, defeated sigh from the car. She tells them this is her stop, and that they should enjoy their night. You know, like a totally supportive third wheel. The car door slams shut, leaving them in front of a very fancy hotel. And as the car drives away, the two are left alone in the snow. Yuta can't help but notice the strange look Ivi gave them as she left. But Misuzu just grabs his hand, pulling him back to the present. She suggests they find a convenience store before checking in. Yuta panics, suggesting a much cheaper, less formal hotel. He stammers that it's too soon, reminding her they're only 15. But Misuzu looks him dead in the eye, declaring that she's completely serious. He asks if it's okay with Ivi, as if that's the main issue here. Misuzu's confidence falters as she admits the truth. She's terrified of Ivi. A flashback reveals she was always used to being the most popular girl in class, but she's afraid that Ivi, who's richer and kinder, will eventually steal Yuta away. She looks up at the hotel, her voice filled with a quiet desperation. She clenches her fist, saying her feelings for him are the only thing that makes her feel like she's not being selfish. And through her tears, she begs him to give her the confidence she's lost. Yuta's eyes widen with a sudden, pained understanding. He looks out at the snowy city and finally agrees to her request. He reflects that his hesitation isn't just about doing the right thing. He knows that explorers are prone to starting families young, and he's heard too many stories of them abandoning their children to die in the dungeon, a fear that has always stayed with him. You know, standard teenage anxieties. And with that heavy thought, they arrive at the hotel. The door to room 603 closes behind them, but Yuta sits on the bed, completely overwhelmed by the reality of the situation. He looks over as the sound of the shower starts from the bathroom. He's having a complete meltdown, worried he's about to cross a line. But his phone buzzes, a sudden interruption from the outside world. He sees a flood of messages from Ivi, Imari, and even Nagumo. He panics, realizing he's been gone for 5 days without a word. Just as Misuzu steps out of the bathroom, catching him completely off guard. She looks at him, a quiet vulnerability in her eyes, and she stops him from leaving, telling him he can't go. She begs him to just stay with her in this moment. Her words leave our boy a completely flustered mess, and she closes the distance between them once more. But their moment is shattered by a familiar, grinning face. Nagumo stands in their hotel room, having just returned from a trip. He says he came because his friend called, much to Yuta's terrified delight. So he grabs our boy, deciding to take him on an impromptu trip abroad. You know, as friends do. Misuzu's eyes widen in complete and utter disbelief. She yells that if he's going, she's coming with him. But Nagumo just teleports Yuta away, leaving her completely alone. She's left completely stunned by the sudden abduction, and can only scream in frustration outside the hotel. As the scene shifts to the snowy skies of Arizona, USA, Yuta tries to ask Nagumo what's happening, but finds himself standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon. You know, a totally normal detour. Nagumo just smirks, calling it a nice and quiet spot. Yuta is still completely lost by the sudden change of scenery. Nagumo gets uncomfortably close, asking what's on his mind. He points out how much Yuta's charisma has grown. Yuta admits this new face doesn't feel like his own, but Nagumo says he'll get used to it. He then holds up a familiar ring, telling our boy to watch closely. A demonstration that leaves Yuta completely speechless, as Nagumo transforms into a woman right before his very eyes. Nagumo explains this was his original human form, a fact that leaves Yuta completely flustered, as Nagumo warns him of the same fate. Yuta nervously asks if Nagumo gets along with his own companions. Nagumo just scoffs, saying his strength is all that matters. You know, a totally healthy team dynamic. But Yuta's expression shifts with a sudden dawning realization. He finally understands the pressure Nagumo must have been under. Nagumo admits his party almost broke up once, but they have a mediator. Yuta then confesses that 3 different girls have feelings for him. Nagumo knows about 2 of them, but is completely stumped by the 3rd. So Yuta explains it's his stepsister, Imari, whose parents just divorced. Nagumo asks him who he likes the most, and Yuta immediately answers, Misuzu. Nagumo just smiles, saying that's a good choice for someone like him. But Yuta admits he can't just abandon Imari or Evie. Nagumo calls him out, saying his indecisiveness is the real problem. He reminds Yuta that he could just have them all. Complaining that it's too much trouble, he tells him to just make up his mind. He then asks if Yuta is absolutely sure it's Misuzu he's fallen for, insisting that if Yuta is confident, the girls will accept his choice. Yuta is completely overwhelmed, wondering if this crazy plan could actually work. You know, because relationship advice from a shape-shifting god is always solid. But his phone suddenly rings, snapping him out of his thoughts. Nagumo teases him, saying Misuzu is probably furious. A sudden realization hits Yuta. He apologizes, showing Nagumo his phone. He explains that he has to go back. A message from Koharu came in after they left the dungeon. It says Ikamoto is back at school, threatening to end him. You know, standard high school drama. And just like that, Nagumo teleports him to school. Yuta can only thank him for the unexpected ride. Nagumo just laughs, inviting him to Vegas next time. And with a final wave, the high-level explorer is gone. Yuta looks to Nagumo, asking a serious question. He asks him to look after Imari if he doesn't make it back. Nagumo agrees, but asks if he's in trouble with explorers again. Yuta is taken aback by the question. He clenches his fist, saying this is a fight he must face alone. Nagumo warns him that a high-level gap means certain death. You know, just some light encouragement. But Yuta's resolve doesn't waver in the slightest. He knows if Ikamoto survived, he's likely a higher level now. He just asks Nagumo not to interfere in this fight. His eyes narrow, his decision now final. A flash of a determined face, as Fumiko warns that if anyone touches Yuta's friends, she will personally end them. Nagumo insists that he's being completely serious. Yuta tries to calm him down, saying a warning should be enough. But his own anger boils over, unable to accept that his tormentor is still alive. So Nagumo tells him that if he's going to fight, he'd better win. You know, just a little bit of pressure. Yuta stands before the school, his mentor's words echoing in his mind. He steels himself, ready to face his past, and heads for Class 3A, where his old bully is waiting. The teacher stands at the front of the class, telling everyone to take their seats. She smiles, announcing that the lesson is about to begin. But Yuta has no idea who this woman is. Another student realizes her appearance must have changed after leveling up. The teacher admits she's only level 10, much to the class's admiration. A student asks Yuta if he's just going to quit school now, but the teacher just laughs, saying she's quitting to go on a dungeon run with her husband. You know, standard career goals. Yuta realizes she must be a first-generation explorer, making her far more powerful than her level suggests. Just then, the classroom door slides open with a lazy apology for being late, and in walks Ikamoto, looking as smug and arrogant as ever. Ikamoto greets him with a smug, condescending look. Yuta can only stare back, realizing his tormentor is still alive. The bully immediately slams his fist down, shattering Yuta's desk and demanding an apology, for existing. The teacher tries to intervene, telling him to wait until after class, but Ikamoto just scoffs, calling on his friends. His cronies immediately grab the teacher, much to Yuta's shock. Ikamoto proudly declares that he's now level 15, but a voice from the doorway tells them to stop. It's Koharu, warning them not to get cocky just because they've leveled up. Yuta assesses the situation. 4 level 15 explorers. Ikamoto screams at him, completely enraged. But Yuta just asks why he should be the one to apologize. The bully accuses him of leaving him to die, but Yuta reminds him he went in alone. Ikamoto just laughs, boasting that he leveled up after the incident. Koharu mentions someone named Kyoka, who apparently helped them. Yuta recalls seeing a woman with that name watching them in Asakusa. He wonders why anyone would bother helping his old tormentor. but he decides he'll just have to find out for himself. And with a clench of his fist, he prepares for the fight to come. Ikamoto's friend calls out his name, but the bully is completely stunned. Yuta calmly suggests they settle this in the dungeon, a place where anything can happen and no one will be held responsible. Ikamoto scoffs, demanding to know what level our boy is. So Yuta calmly shows him his status screen. Level 7. A small, almost imperceptible smirk crosses his face. Ikamoto laughs, thinking he's lying, and reveals he's level 15. He gets in Yuta's face, mocking his stats and the massive level gap. But Yuta's gaze is cold, declaring their history will end in the dungeon, a challenge that his old tormentor seems more than happy to accept. Yuta considers the level gap, thinking this might be reckless. But he knows that win or lose, Ikamoto's fate is sealed. The bully just laughs, eagerly accepting the challenge. He sets the stage in the Asakusa dungeon, wary of any tricks. Yuta calmly agrees, his expression unreadable. His eyes narrow with a cold, unwavering focus. The final confrontation is about to begin. Ikamoto orders his friends to get ready, dragging the teacher along. He then tells Koharu to call their benefactor and come watch the show. You know, for moral support. He turns back to Yuta, mocking him for his silence. Ikamoto points a finger, telling Yuta there's no running away this time. Yuta just sighs, thinking he's somehow managed to handle this. He turns to his teacher, asking if she's all right. He apologizes for getting her involved, but she admits the principal already asked her to deal with them. In fact, she's so furious she's ready to join the fight herself. You know, a totally professional response. She asks if he's really going to face them alone, offering to back him up. But Yuta recalls all the times he was tormented, a past he's always wanted to escape. The teacher looks on with concern, asking if he even has a chance of winning. He quietly admits that he doesn't, but that's not the point. He looks up with a grin, promising to at least land one solid hit. His eyes are filled with a quiet, unwavering resolve. The teacher tells him that a man can change in just 3 days, and as they walk, she calls him a good person. They arrive at the Asakusa station, the site of the dungeon, but Koharu suddenly runs up, telling Yuta to wait. She begs him to run, promising to help him escape. Yuta is completely confused by her sudden change of heart. She screams that Ikamoto can't die because it would be a loss for the world. You know, a totally sound argument. She complains that another boy's charisma stat hasn't changed at all, but she stares at Yuta, realizing he's different. Yuta is completely flustered by her sudden interest in him. She insists his looks have nothing to do with it, as he begs her to stay out of this. Koharu argues that her help is needed, but Yuta flatly refuses. He tells her not to involve anyone else in his fight with Ikamoto. She calls him a fool for his pride, telling him he absolutely cannot die. But Yuta clenches his fist, knowing he's not going in completely unprepared. He declares that he will make this a fight between him and Ikamoto alone. His mind flashes back to the moment it all began, a memory of a younger but no less cruel Ikamoto Kazuya. He remembers the torment always began with a friendly invitation to play. A flashback to the cruel eyes that started it all, to a younger Yuta back in the 5th grade. Ikamoto saw him as nothing more than a living toy. He rationalized that Yuta just happened to fight back, and he cried, feeling like he was the one being wronged. Yuta recalls how that single incident ruined his entire life, because in Ikamoto's mind, the toy had dared to defy him, a moment of resistance that a young Yuta would pay for dearly. The bully felt the world was looking down on him, and he would never forgive it. And back in the present, Yuta stands ready in the Asakusa dungeon. Yuta asks if his tormentor is really that scared of him, but Ikamoto just stands there, completely confident on the 1st floor. He laughs, mocking Yuta for getting so full of himself. Yuta's gaze remains steady, knowing there's more to this fight. Ikamoto's friends Onoda and Goto stand ready in their gear, but Yuta's attention is drawn to another group in the distance. He recognizes Kyoka and her party from before. You know, the mysterious benefactors. He sighs, realizing this has just become a massive pain. Ikamoto screams at Kyoka, reminding her she promised not to interfere. Yuta just watches, thinking their little dispute might actually help him. He knows that at his current level, a 3-on-1 is a guaranteed loss. So his only path to victory is to force a 1-on-1 fight with Ikamoto. Kyoka wonders just how much she can trust Yuta's word. But she puts on a confident smile, waving as if it's all under control. Ikamoto's friends urge him to start, questioning if he even needs their help. But the bully screams back, telling them to stay out of it. He turns to Yuta with a cruel grin, asking if he's scared now. You know, since his backup just bailed, Yuta just asks if he'd really be happy winning against a level 7 with his friends. Ikamoto screams that he'd be thrilled, since he loves a one-sided fight. Yuta can only look on, acknowledging his tormentor's refreshingly honest cruelty. Yuta recalls how the torment began back in elementary school. It started with his things being thrown away and his desk vandalized. The bully was always careful to never leave any evidence behind. In middle school, the abuse became physical but always hidden. His refusal to give in only made the torment worse, until he finally broke, thinking he'd rather die than go to school. But in the present, a different kind of fire burns in his eyes, because he admits he's wanted to end Ikimoto just as many times. The bully glares at the other party, annoyed by their presence. Kyoka asks if he's already forgotten her gentle lesson. A totally healthy mentorship. One of Kyoka's companions complains about being called a monster, but Kyoka admits her danger sense is going wild, and she never wanted to come. Ikemoto's friend suddenly points, his eyes wide with shock. Kyoka demands to know who is standing behind Yuta. Yuta's gaze remains fixed, completely focused. He makes a small, almost imperceptible gesture. He asks what she's talking about, feigning ignorance. She insists a level 7 kid shouldn't be this dangerous. Her spidey sense is tingling. And in a flash, one of Ikemoto's friends is taken down. Yuta's eyes are cold, knowing this is a move they can't escape. He reveals he asked a man named Nagumo to handle things. The remaining friend can only stare in abject terror. Ikemoto demands to know if Yuta will accept all their terms. But Kyoka screams at him, calling him a fool for picking this fight. She slams her foot down, shattering the ground beneath her, and tells her pet to shut up and stay quiet. A healthy mentor-mentee relationship. Ikemoto can only glare back as Yuta watches the chaos unfold. Kyoka offers a deal. She'll apologize if Yuta puts in a good word with Nagumo. But Yuta's only condition is a one-on-one fight with Ikemoto. Kyoka scoffs, saying she didn't raise him to lose to a level 7. Ikemoto is furious, realizing that if he loses, Nagumo will get involved. Yuta just tells Kyoka to pray for his victory. Her party panics, recalling Nagumo's reputation for killing gods. But Yuta's resolve remains unshaken, despite the pressure. So Kyoka orders Ikemoto to fight Yuta all by himself. The bully explodes, furious that his friends are hesitating. Yuta's calm demeanor seems to confuse Ikemoto's cronies. They suggest he could just apologize and end this peacefully. The easy way out. But Ikemoto screams that he was planning to end Yuta with his friends. Yuta just tells him to be quiet. Ikemoto kicks a rock from the ground, sending it flying straight towards Yuta. The stones land harmlessly at his feet. The bully screams that Yuta has no chance of winning a one-on-one fight. Because math. Suddenly, an object flies through the air. An empty potion bottle that rolls to a stop at Ikemoto's feet. As the bully drinks his own potion, Yuta calls out his name. He asks how it feels for his own actions to backfire so completely. A memory flashes of the constant torment, the feeling of utter hopelessness. But now, Yuta declares that Ikemoto will be the one to face his inner demons. Ikemoto asks if Yuta is the one who never fought back. But Yuta recalls the day his tormentor was the one who cried, a memory of a younger Ikemoto, terrified of his own actions. The bully sneers, asking if Yuta is blaming him for everything. Yuta stands his ground, his aura flaring as he agrees. He yells that Ikemoto is the one who knows he's at fault, a declaration that leaves everyone completely stunned. Ikemoto screams, blaming Yuta's exclusive gear and broken luck. The classic sore loser excuse. But Yuta just activates a skill, his stats skyrocketing from a potion, and he charges forward, closing the distance in an instant. He vanishes in a blinding flash of speed. Ikemoto screams, wondering where he could have gone. But Yuta is already behind him, his eyes cold and focused. And he unleashes a devastating strike before the bully can react. The blow connects, leaving Ikemoto completely stunned. Yuta stands over his fallen tormentor, the fight already over. The bully can only gasp, his arrogance completely shattered. Our boy just watches, his expression completely unreadable. Ikemoto's eyes are filled with a terror he's never known. He screams for Yuta to stay away, completely and utterly broken. Ikemoto calls out, his voice filled with pure terror. Tears stream down his face, his mind unable to process what happened. He collapses to the ground completely and utterly defeated. Yuta tells him not to get cocky just because he's level 15. The bully screams, asking if Yuta is really trying to kill him. Yuta's eyes are cold as he reminds him of his promise. He holds his blade, declaring he's here to settle things for good. He yells that this was the only reason he came today. A title card appears, declaring that life is easy. For some people. The scene shifts to a memory of a younger, smug Ikemoto, a boy who knew how to manipulate adults. He saw tormenting good kids as a way to blow off steam, a secret way to relieve his stress without anyone knowing. He even had a girlfriend, though he considered her a compromise. But being satisfied only made him want to aim even higher. He even dreamed of dating someone like Misuzu. You know, aim for the stars. All these memories flash through his mind as Yuta looms over him. Our boy's eyes are cold, his judgment already passed. Ikamoto can only gasp, his body trembling with fear. His mind is completely broken by the sudden turn of events, and he can only watch as his body begins to crumble away. Yuta's blade falls to the ground. He pants, the adrenaline finally wearing off. Kyoka steps forward, her patience clearly gone. She brings her foot down with devastating force. The bully can only stare as his hand crumbles away. He screams out in a mix of pain and fury. He begs Kyoka for a potion, pleading for his life, but his desperate cries fall on deaf ears. Her expression is one of pure, utter disappointment. She declares that he's completely useless to her now. You know, a totally supportive mentor. The bully can only gasp, his mind completely shattered. He desperately calls out to his friends for help, but they can only watch, just as terrified as he is. Kyoka's party laments their wasted investment in the boy. Yuta looks on, a quiet sense of satisfaction on his face. Kyoka knows that if he had lost, a far worse fate awaited them all. She turns her attention back to the boy who just won, and Yuta offers her one final condition before this is over. He'll let her spare Ikamoto's friends as long as they stay away. He agrees, knowing they were just pawns in the bully's game. Kyoka's party decides to cut their losses, abandoning Ikamoto to his fate. Kyoka turns her cold gaze to the defeated bully on the ground. She tells him he's served his purpose and can disappear now. A new wave of terror washes over Ikamoto's face. Koharu suddenly appears, begging Kyoka to do something, but her plea is cut short by a sudden realization. She seems completely captivated by the display of power. You know, a totally normal reaction to all this. Yuta can only watch, the battle having taken its toll. He stands as a completely different person than the boy who was tormented. His eyes are filled with a cold, hard-won resolve. Ikamoto tries to stammer out a plea for him to wait. He begs for his life, finally admitting that he was wrong. But Yuta takes another step forward, his advance unwavering. He looks down, completely unimpressed by the sudden apology. He reminds the bully that they're in the middle of a death match. You know, not exactly the time for heartfelt apologies. Ikamoto screams that this has to be a joke, begging for someone to save him. But Yuta just raises his blade once more, and brings it down without a moment's hesitation. He asks if Ikamoto ever stopped when he was the one begging. The bully screams that this is unfair, that he agreed to a one-on-one fight. He screams that Yuta only won because of his powerful gear. But Yuta just asks if there's a problem with that. He reminds the bully of his own words, that one-sided fights are the most fun. Ikamoto can only beg him to wait, his mind completely broken. He even tries to use his mother as a shield, just like he did in the past. But Yuta's blade falls without a moment of hesitation. His eyes are cold, his long-awaited revenge finally complete. And in a single, decisive flash, the fight is finally over. You know, a totally fair and balanced match, leaving the onlookers completely stunned by what they just witnessed. One of the onlookers can only state the obvious. He actually did it. Yuta's eyes are cold, the deed finally done, and his tormentor fades away, his face a mask of pure terror. Yuta calmly confirms that he ended the fight. He then tells the bully's friends to take their companion and leave. Kyoka clarifies that she's not protecting him, just telling him to be quiet. Yuta agrees, admitting he can't trust them either. And with that, the two friends make a very hasty exit, for their health. Kyoka tries to settle things, offering a payment to avoid Nagumo's wrath. Yuta just looks on, agreeing to her surprisingly honest offer. Kyoka tosses a small bottle over to Yuta. He catches it, still reeling from the fight. It's a full recovery potion, an elixir of incredible value, a gift that leaves our boy completely stunned. She just tells him it's a small price to pay for a life, and with that, she declares their business is officially over. Her party walks away, telling her to keep a better leash on her pets. A totally healthy dynamic. Yuta is left alone, the weight of the day finally crashing down on him. But his quiet moment is shattered by Koharu, who suggests they leave together. He's completely shocked, wondering why she's still even here. She admits she's the kind of girl who likes being used by handsome men, and that just thinking about it gets her excited. Her gaze turns intense as she looks at Yuta, and she asks for a very personal reward for her help, insisting that since she cooperated, she deserves a little something in return. But Yuta just stares at the spot where his bully vanished, ignoring her completely. Koharu points out that he had no choice but to end Ikamoto to survive, a fact that Yuta can only grimly accept. She admits it's not something you can just move on from, but her train of thought is cut short as she spots Kyoka nearby. Yuta tells Koharu he needs her to take him to Ikamoto's house. She can only stare back, completely stunned by his request. He explains he has to tell the bully's mother what happened, even if she ends up hating him for it. Koharu can only look on, still processing his words. She recalls Ikamoto's mother, an overprotective woman who was always a handful, a woman who believed every word her son said, convinced he was a perfect child. Koharu admits she was the one who took him into the dungeon, and that he should have been the one to die protecting her. You know, a totally healthy perspective on loss. Yuta asks if she's really okay with what just happened. She just scoffs, admitting that while she was shocked, her feelings for the bully had long since faded. But Yuta's gaze remains fixed, sensing there's more to her story. But Yuta tells her to stop, his gaze unwavering. He holds up a hand, refusing her strange offer. The two stand in the empty dungeon at a clear impasse. But her words seem to strike a chord with him. He looks down, a quiet understanding on his face. Kyoka approaches, asking what's wrong, but Yuta tells her to leave it to him. Koharu asks what he'll do now, mentioning her own plans with Kyoka. Yuta just admits that she's become quite strong. You know, a totally smooth compliment. A sudden hand slaps against his chest, and Kyoka leans in, declaring she doesn't need his praise or apology. She explains her specialty is immobilizing her enemies. You know, a totally normal skill to have. A skill she demonstrates on a tiny fairy-like creature. A move that leaves Yuta completely horrified. He runs for his life, begging her to stop complicating his relationships. The scene shifts to a TV studio, where the monster enthusiast Yonazaki is being interviewed. The host asks if he's already done talking about goblin ecology. Yonazaki just smiles, saying any more talk outside the dungeon would be a bad idea. The host panics but asks for one final comment. Yonazaki declares that the dungeon is a blessing from God. Yuta watches the broadcast, the man's words echoing in his mind. The next day, Yuta laces up his boots. He prepares to head out into the snow, but Imari calls out his name from the doorway. She sleepily asks if he's already leaving. She grabs his arm, begging him not to go so soon after returning. He admits that since the day he ended Ikamoto, he's felt completely drained. He recalls finding her collapsed with a high fever. Her hand had desperately clung to his sleeve, as she begged him not to leave her side. You know, because abandonment issues are a powerful motivator, and he had simply smiled, promising to stay. He had promised to stay by her side until she recovered, a promise that leaves her completely flustered. She yells that she's fine now, telling him he can leave. Yuta just looks on, calling out her name in confusion. She realizes he probably won't be back until her birthday. He explains he wants to clear up to the 4th floor if he can. His gaze is filled with a quiet, unwavering focus. But Imari stops him, a question in her eyes. She smiles, saying he never listens when it comes to the dungeon. You know, a classic case of selective hearing. And her words seem to land with a heavy weight. The memory of his blade still lingers in his mind. He admits that he can't stop now. Imari calls out his name, her voice filled with concern. He apologizes, saying he's too weak to protect anyone as he is. And with a final goodbye, he leaves to get stronger. His words leave her completely stunned, but her expression hardens with a quiet resolve. She knows he wouldn't feel this way if she were by his side. The scene shifts to the dungeon's 3rd floor. Yuta arrives to find it's hotter, with a new level cap of 16. He spots something in the distance, a look of discovery on his face. Before him lies a massive goblin settlement sprawling across the valley. This floor is home to a whole society of goblins, from soldiers to mages and even generals. Riders patrol the perimeter, ready to call in an army at the first sign of trouble. You know, a proper neighborhood watch. Yuta checks his stats, realizing a direct assault would be a very short, very sad story. Misuzu confirms what he's thinking, her own screen telling the same grim tale, because their new party quest is to take down the Goblin Emperor himself. Yuta stands beside his massive lion mount, preparing for the mission ahead. Misuzu returns from her scouting run, reporting on the enemy's positions. He thanks her for the help, but tells her to leave the searching to his new skill. Evie looks on, a flicker of concern in her eyes. Misuzu asks if they're really going to do this without Imari, since the quest can only be cleared once. Yuta explains he read about a party that lost a member here, which triggered a special replacement quest. The girls realize just how high the stakes are on this floor. So Yuta declares they'll make a solid plan to ensure that never happens to them. And with that, their conquest of the 3rd floor officially begins. Their strategy is to grind from level 7 to 10 by picking off the rider patrols, avoiding the main settlement. The one who will be drawing all the attention and leading the charge into battle is Yuta himself. You know, because he's the main character, Misuzu takes her position on higher ground, ready to provide support. Her eyes narrow as she spots her targets in the distance. Two goblin riders charge across the savannah below. She activates her skill, magical energy swirling around her, combining her steel bow and refined shot to ensure they can't call for backup. She takes a steadying breath, her confidence unwavering. Meanwhile, Yuta fights with a ferocity that even surprises his companions. Elsewhere, Nagumo returns to Japan, casually asking if his favorite kid is back yet. A totally normal mentor check-in. A text exchange reveals Yuta's excuse for being out of touch. Imari has a fever, but Misuzu's expression turns serious, recalling a suspicious phone call from Koharu. Back at home, Imari worries that Misuzu might die protecting her. But in the dungeon, Misuzu tries to push those thoughts aside. She panics, thinking about what happened after their last break. Her outburst immediately draws the attention of a nearby goblin. Stealth is optional. Evie screams, wondering what Misuzu is doing out in the open. She yells for Yuta not to let Rin get away. Her eyes narrow with a sudden fierce determination, and a goblin is struck down in a flash of movement. The blow lands with incredible shattering force. A silent scream from the creature as it's taken down. Rin lets out a furious roar, activating a special ability. She unleashes a powerful sonic blast from her small frame. The attack stuns the approaching goblin rider, and she follows up with a devastating ground slam. Evie can only watch, stunned by her summon's ferocity. Her eyes widen as she senses another threat approaching. Misuzu screams a warning as another rider charges in, but a stone bullet finds its mark first, taking the creature down. She looks over to see Yuta has already joined the fight. He yells for them to hold on, promising it's almost over. Misuzu can only watch, completely stunned by his ferocity. She wonders if Yuta has become overwhelmingly powerful, but her thoughts turn inward, her expression darkening. She was supposed to be providing cover, but she failed, and her mistake has drawn some very unwanted attention. As a fresh wave of riders charges straight for her, because goblins love an easy target. She activates her fire arrow skill, ready to correct her error. The blast takes out 2 of the riders in a fiery explosion, but she knows there are still 4 more to deal with, and they're closing in far too quickly for her to fire again. The goblin riders turn their attention to her. Their eyes are fixed on their new target, but a blur of motion cuts through their ranks, as another one is taken down in a flash. It's Yuta, leading a countercharge with Evie right behind him. Evie unleashes a powerful attack of her own, cutting through the chaos. Because teamwork makes the dream work. She looks over with a panicked expression, calling out a warning. Yuta looks back, completely confused by her sudden alarm. He calls out to Evie, asking if she's been hurt. And from her perch, Misuzu screams down, asking if everyone is all right. Evie looks over, her expression filled with concern. Misuzu flinches, shaken by her near-fatal mistake. She insists she's fine, brushing it off as a minor accident. And so they continue their grind, hunting the riders and leveling up. A few long days pass in the endless savannah, until an exhausted Misuzu finally calls for a break. Evie agrees, taking a moment to recover from the constant fighting. She announces they've all finally reached their goal of level 10. A perfect time for a company-wide performance review. She turns to Yuta, asking if he wants to keep pushing forward. But he shakes his head, knowing they're not ready for what's next. He decides it's time to make camp and rest for the night. A suggestion that the girls seem to be very, very happy about. They fawn over his high charisma, leaving our boy completely flustered. And so they set up their base of operations in the middle of the savannah. But later, Evie stands alone, a quiet worry on her mind. Her expression is distant, lost in her own thoughts, until Yuta approaches, offering her a warm drink. He explains that Misuzu is already fast asleep from exhaustion. A statement immediately proven false as Misuzu practices her swordplay with surprising energy. For someone who's exhausted. Yuta asks Evie if something is bothering her, sensing her unease. Evie admits she's worried she'll just be abandoned. A confession that leaves Yuta completely stunned. She points out that he must have noticed she's the one targeted most often. Because the goblins don't just attack randomly, they always go for the weakest link. A quick analysis shows her gacha luck is better than Misuzu's, but still not enough for a comeback. She recalls what Nagumo told her in America, asking if they're just barely scraping by. Yuta agrees, knowing that high-level players can S-rank these quests with ease. Elsewhere, a familiar elf watches over them, cheering on their efforts. Because everyone needs a guardian angel. But back in the savannah, Evie is completely taken aback by his words. She admits that she feels like she's the only one who's lacking something. But Yuta's gaze softens with understanding. He admits that his own strategies are full of holes. He's always felt like he was weaker than everyone else. So he understands exactly how she feels right now. He insists he's grateful for her, but he's still not strong enough. So she reaches out, asking him to let her help. A quiet promise passes between them, but she pulls her hand back, her resolve hardening. She apologizes, saying she needs a little more time to think, declaring that as she is now, she's not worthy of him. Yuta can only call out her name, his voice filled with concern. And as a new day dawns on the savannah, and playfully wakes up a very sleepy Misuzu, who in turn wakes up an even sleepier Iwai. You know, the circle of life. Misuzu admits she just wants to spend more time with Yuta, but the mood in the party is anything but romantic. She asked why everyone suddenly looks so grim. Evie activates a skill, a dark circle forming at her feet. Her eyes narrow with a cold, unwavering focus, and she declares that both of them are now zebras, a move that leaves both Yuta and Misuzu completely stunned. Elsewhere, the monster enthusiast Yonazaki tells his own zebra companion not to rush. He grins, saying they wouldn't want to miss the precious scene about to unfold.